Wake up, Twins territory. Welcome back for another episode of Twins Hangouts. We'd like to encourage you to turn down the Twins game and listen to us for the next couple of hours. Just to remind you, if you're not listening live or you can't listen to the whole episode, you can download the audio-only version of our Hangout on iTunes, and we'd appreciate any feedback that you'd like to give us. I apologize for the iTunes issues last week. Again, that's 2 weeks in a row, but hopefully those are all resolved and things will be smooth sailing here for the next few weeks, or at least for tonight. As anyways, Mr. Seth Stows, a.k.a. Stostradamus, is joining me again tonight. Seth, how you doing?
I'm doing just wonderful, actually. Hopefully everyone out there had a wonderful and safe July 4th weekend. Mine was good. We went to our lake cabin, did a little fishing, hanging out, saw some family, all that kind of good stuff. So it was good. Always hard to come back to work then after that. But, we've got a lot of Twins topics to talk about tonight. I mean, there's just been a ton of topics, some controversial topics, and I think, Jeremy, we're going to jump into those pretty quickly here.
For sure.
And how was your weekend?
It was fine. It was long. The kids are tired. I'm tired. And then started swimming lessons on Monday morning. So it's a busy month. And then I go right from that to football in 4 weeks. And my summer is effectively over. So, yeah, fun stuff. We should mention the two of us will be at the Futures game. And that's Sunday. We've skipped a little bit ahead already, but next Tuesday is the All-Star game, and I will be there. I will actually be holding the national anthem flag for the national anthem, and so I won't be here hanging out. But Seth and I plan to have just a regular edition next Wednesday. So if you guys can come and hang out with us on Wednesday, let's do that.
Hey, Jeremy, take a minute and just kind of talk a little bit about the flag raising piece, because that's really pretty cool.
Yeah, so a couple days ago, I don't even know what day it was, maybe Thursday, I was up early and just flipping through Facebook, and the Twins season ticket holders, there's a Twins season ticket holder Facebook page, and I saw that they had said something about if you're an educator, let us know if you're coming to the All-Star game. So I just posted on there. There was probably like 15 comments. And so I just made a quick post and didn't think anything of it. And then that afternoon, I'd been dealing with some other stuff where I was calling people with 612 numbers. So that afternoon, I got a phone call from a 612 number and expecting it to be something completely unrelated. And it turned out it was a lady with the Twins. And she said, "You're the person that commented on the Facebook page?" I said, "Yeah." And long story short, yeah. Well, I knew that what I did was okay, and she just said we're looking for people in education to hold the flag for the national anthem. So she wanted to make sure that I was planning on coming. And they're actually doing a rehearsal next Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. and it's like a 4-hour practice. And I just told her, I said, "Hey, my dad's coming with me. He works. I have kids that I'm watching, and we're over an hour away, so that's just not going to happen." And she said that wasn't a deal breaker, so that was good. We're going to get a free T-shirt, have to wear khaki shorts or pants. And the one thing I'm kind of bummed out about is that we have to meet at like 5 o'clock, so I won't see any of the pregame stuff. But I think being on the field will trump that. I plan to have my phone out during the anthem, which may be disrespectful, but I'll be taking pictures of all the cool stuff with my phone. And my dad actually was kind of excited. I didn't expect him to have any emotion at all, but my mom said that he was kind of excited when she told him about it. So it should be kind of fun. Obviously, it's a one-time in a lifetime thing, so it'd be hard to turn it down.
Well, certainly. I mean, first of all, you'll be on the same field with guys like Mike Trout and Miguel Cabrera and, Kurt Suzuki, so that's pretty exciting.
And actually, Mike Trout is telling a friend that he'll be on the same field as me.
I'm sure he is.
Yeah, I mean, that's cool.
Yeah.
So we'll
what an honor.
I mean, I'll tweet pictures out, and I'd assume that there's probably 100 people or so that'll be holding the flag because it's a pretty large flag. So that'll be neat. It'll be fun. So look for me. I'll be rocking the same red shirt as everybody else, but I'll be the one with the phone out, taking pictures, taking selfies with the flag.
Great. That's awesome.
we're going to go to the futures game. Let's jump forward to that. Um, if you want a picture with us, come find us, and we can take a selfie together.
That sounds like a great plan.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I'm
Think we'll
willing to
get
take selfies.
any takers for that? You think we'll get a single taker? Like, hey, it's you two. Let's take a picture together.
Yeah, probably not because I don't
They
know.
didn't.
But if you're going, let us know, and we'll find a way to find you.
Yeah, let's say that we're gonna go hang out at the digital clubhouse, and people can take pictures with us.
There you go. Good
Yeah.
times for
I mean, we'll do
them.
whatever. If you're around, let us know. We'll talk baseball. We'll watch prospects. It'll be great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now that it's 9:05, let's jump right into the biggest news of the week, and that's Ricky Nolasco's sore elbow, in my opinion. And you can disagree with that or agree with that if you'd like, but I wrote the script, so that's where we're starting.
I'm good with that.
Okay, to summarize, here's the deal. If you haven't heard, obviously Ricky Nolasco's been brutal. That's step one. Step two, Gardy wasn't impressed, and after his 2-inning outing the other day, he said post-game that all possibilities were being discussed. Someone asked if that included the bullpen, and that's when he said, we're discussing everything. From what I could piece together, having listened to Gardy's interview on MLB Network this afternoon, he said that they had a meeting yesterday in Seattle and basically told him, we want to move you to the bullpen. And, I don't have it verbatim, but Nolasco's response is, I'm not a bullpen guy, I can't do that. And that's completely understandable. And then after some pressing, he said, it's really hard for me to get loose. I can't get loose. If I was moved to the bullpen, I would never be able to get loose, which that sounded familiar because I think we dealt with that a couple years ago. It's kind of slowly. So it was that point that he said, my elbow's been kind of sore. It's been sore since spring training. I've tried to pitch through it, and a move to the bullpen really make that worse. At that point, the Twins said, well, we don't really have any other choices. We're going to send you back home. You're going to get an MRI, get it checked out to see what's wrong. Well, apparently everything checked out fine. He was placed
As
on
expected, to be honest, right?
Exactly. Placed on the 15-day disabled list today, Ricky Nolasco was, and Chris Herndon was recalled from Rochester. So, Seth, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that really covers the topics. I mean, clearly something isn't quite right. So we've been assuming that for a little while. Nolasco, we all knew he wasn't a number one. We all knew he wasn't a number two, and I think we were all excited about the Twins spending 4 years, $49 million, even understanding that he was a number three. When things were good. Maybe he had the chance to be a number two at times, as Phil Hughes has been to this point. But I think none of us were expecting him to have a 2.5 or 3 ERA, but he's also not a 6 ERA guy. I mean, that's just not right. The way he was getting hit, we knew he was going to give up hits, but everything he was giving up was hit hard. And you could see he had to really work just to keep things at bay a lot of innings. And it's been that way. So I think there were a lot of people saying, there must be something wrong. There was a little velocity dip at times, and certainly not pinpoint control, especially inside the strike zone. So there were a lot of things going on, and it was time. I mean, if it weren't for that contract, he would have been in the bullpen long ago, or they would have tried to figure out something long ago. And we know that. It was time. I mean, we're at early July now. We've gone through April, May, and June. That's 3 months of the season, and it was time. So the bullpen thing, I think, was a good idea. And maybe I'll lead into the controversial topics of this discussion. As it came out, as you said, Gardenhire basically had to pry it out of Nolasco that something wasn't right, and he needed to get checked out. And finally, he did admit that. And the controversy, and we can talk about this as much or as little as we want because it's been the big topic, is Gardenhire made comments to say, he's an old school guy and he likes old school players and the guys that understand you're going to be hurt, you're going to be sore. The tough part is you have to communicate to the management, to the front office and to the training staff when you're feeling injured. There's a difference between being sore, being hurt, and being injured. And was Nolasco there based on the results of this MRI? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe he's just sore. And if that's the case, everyone's sore. So I know that it's been a topic, and I think you and I agree that the comments that Gardenhire made by themselves are not a big issue. Now, a lot of people are taking exception to it because of some perceived inability for people to come to the manager to talk about such things. And I'm not sure where that comes from. I think the biggest factor in the discussion or some of the dissension right now, well, one, there's a lot of people that want Ron Gardenhire, Rick Anderson, and others gone in the first place, and every little thing that's said or done is going to set people off. And secondly, the Twins are losing right now. They're not scoring runs. The pitching hasn't been consistent. A lot of things aren't going right, and this is just one more thing to be upset about, and the timing is just unfortunate because it's all coming on Gardy. And I think you and I both agree. I don't know, maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in my mind, this is on Nolasco.
Yeah.
He was the one that had to say something. If he didn't tell the training staff, if he didn't tell Gardenhire or Rick Anderson, that's 100% on him.
Right, and that's exactly how I felt too. But at the same time, no matter how this is all spun, the blame is going to be placed on the guy whose story you don't hear. And we heard Rob Anthony, we've heard Gardy a couple times. We haven't heard Nolasco.
Right.
And if we would have heard Nolasco's story, it could have been, I told him that I was sore 3 weeks ago. They told me to push through it. I told them I couldn't get loose. They told me to push through. That would give us a whole different perception of the story. What we're hearing makes it very easy to say, wow, Ricky Nolasco, you should have said something and maybe this wouldn't have happened. But yeah, I mean, Gardy even said it tonight or this afternoon when they were talking to him. And it wasn't necessarily about Nolasco. It was about cleaning out the clubhouse and his office for the All-Star game. And he said, I've cleaning out my office, I felt like I just got fired. And he said, which probably isn't too far away if the hits don't start coming. So I think, and he chuckled about it, but I think he understands too that after 3 straight 90-loss seasons and, a start that maybe led some people to believe the Twins are better than they were and now a struggle, which it's been for the last month, he probably doesn't have a lot of slack. Now, the thing that's going to always work in his favor is that him and Terry Ryan and Rick Anderson are pretty connected. So if one goes, they all go, and there's no way Terry Ryan's going anywhere, not this year. So that's a whole other discussion. Right now we're on Nolasco now. If you've joined us and you've got in, that's fantastic. I cannot get to Twins Daily right now. It says that the website is offline. So I don't know if we'll be getting a lot of new traffic. But if you're in, stay in because, we'd hate to lose you. Seth, I don't know what kind of response you're getting, but it's on all of my devices, not just one.
I'm on Twins Daily right now, and it's working. So it might just be you.
Wow, what the heck? All right, it's not going to affect us at all because we're just going to keep rolling. The next question now is Nolasco is scheduled to pitch on Friday, and he is now on the disabled list. So we have an opening on Friday. I think the obvious move as of last night was, Chris Johnson's on the same pitch schedule, the same time frame that he could come up, make a start in Colorado. However, I think having the All-Star break kind of complicates things. Maybe complicate's not the right word because I don't know that necessarily makes it harder. Nolasco would start on Friday, which I believe is at the 11th, and then wouldn't necessarily have to pitch again until the 22nd.
Right.
So if you bring Johnson up and then you let him sit, and obviously he could pitch earlier, but he's not going to pitch Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday because of the All-Star break. You could have him start Friday and then send him back down. That's obvious. That's one option. The Twins last year at the All-Star break had a little roster purge where they got sent 5 guys down. Um, on the other hand, Sam Deduno came in for Ricky Nolasco the other night and had a pretty good outing. Could he make the start? I think that's what we're looking at first. So, what is your opinion on how the Twins are going to handle Friday's role?
Yeah, I mean, we're both in agreement that I think the general obvious thing is to call someone up from Rochester. But they did that. They called up a hitter, which I think makes a lot of sense because you don't need as many starters once you get by that point, because you're going to have that break in there, and then you can reshuffle things as necessary. So I do agree. I think Deduno's the easy choice, and I think it's the right choice. But then at that point, there's a lot of other factors into that. If Deduno pitches well, maybe you give him a couple more starts after the break and see how that's going because he was pretty good last year as a starter, and he clearly isn't a bad pitcher. He went through a bad stretch there, but he's a solid pitcher. So I think he might get another chance, but it might just be a one-start thing. Chris Johnson certainly has pitched well. Logan Darnell's pitched well. Alex Meyer's been better his last couple of outings. And the guy that we've been talking about for 2 months, Trevor May, we'll see where he's at that point with his calf injury. So, to me, Deduno's the guy. You have an extra bench bat. You got a guy that can play center field with Sam Fold having kind of, I don't know, maybe obviously he's back in the lineup tonight, but, it's kind of nice to have an actual backup center fielder that can run a little bit, maybe more than Parmalee can and Chris Herman. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. You had a good point earlier today, too, on Twitter about, is it possible that they could have brought up a relief pitching arm? Which is another possibility, again, with Pino, with Gibson out of a short start, and with Deduno probably getting a start, it may not be unwise to have an extra arm, too.
Right, and I guess, that was kind of based on your comment that what the Twins did with Pino when they optioned him when he couldn't pitch was a genius move. And that's, that goes along the same line. You need a guy for Friday, but he only needs to make one start, and then you buy yourself an extra spot. If you're thinking about, you have 25 men on your roster, but your starting pitcher last night is not at your disposal. Your starting pitcher from the 2 nights previous and the night, you got 4 guys that you can't play on any given night, and those are your starting rotation that's not pitching. So if you don't bring that guy up until Friday, which they still certainly could do, and then send him right back down after the game, which they very easily could do, whether that's optioning Chris Herman for a day or whoever, I don't know, but I thought that they might bring up a relief pitcher because you've wasted your 2 long relievers now, basically in starting roles for Gibson and Nolasco. So, I don't know what's going to happen. My guess is that they'll name Deduno the starting pitcher. Deduno will start Friday, and they'll roll into the All-Star break with less than 25 guys. I think they'll probably send Herman back down unless Fold is hurt. But then I honestly think that it's going to be Trevor May. And let's fast forward to that conversation. So Trevor May was named to the Futures game. Shortly after that, Rochester skipped him in a start, and he was placed on the disabled list with a right calf injury.
But not before Jeremy got really excited about that.
Got excited about him being in the Futures game?
About him skipping a start and being in line to potentially start. Before we knew that he was hurt.
Yeah. So I thought it was just, posturing by the Twins to get him ready to go, and then it wasn't. But shortly after he was placed on the disabled list, I talked to someone who had an idea and said, "No, it's a minor deal. No, the Futures game is not in jeopardy." And I felt like, hey, that's a good thing. Now, in the past few days, here's what we've learned. We've learned that he's not going to pitch in the Futures game. Alex Meyer is. But if you follow his timeline at all, he's pretty open with fans. So someone asked him, and he said, "I'm back on the mound, but my rehab schedule doesn't fit with the Futures game." Later, he said to someone that he hopes to start somewhere this weekend. So if you know work that out, that he can start on the 11th, um, he's going to make another start then on the 16th, and then when you need that fifth starter for the Twins after the All-Star break, I think he's your guy because we're
Yeah,
not
I
missing
mean,
a starter.
I, I would agree with that on some point. Now, he's also missed probably 2 starts, and before he would do that, he's going to probably miss the third start and do some rehab. I think they will try to. I personally think that they'll try to give him 2 or maybe even 3 more starts in Rochester before calling him up, just so he's not putting that calf in extra stress or whatever in his first or second start after coming back from that injury. I think we can agree, and of course, if he ends up walking 6 guys in those first 2 outings, that changes everything. But I think they're going to give him a little bit of time just to make sure he's at 100%, and they're not calling someone up in a bad position to either re-hurt themselves or obviously pitch poorly.
Maybe we're looking at this all wrong. Maybe we're looking at it that this calf injury was way less minor than it's been played out to be. Maybe he's still throwing his bullpens, but the Twins are trying to limit his innings. I mean, he's pitched a ton of innings. He pitched a lot of innings last year, 150 some. Then went to the fall league and worked out of the bullpen. What if the Twins want him to be the guy that takes it every fifth day after the All-Star break? And this was just their plan. We're going to shut you down the beginning of or the end of June. We're gonna get you back going here right away in July, which he said on his Twitter account. He's already back on the mound. He'll make 2 starts in Rochester. He'll be back for the Twins on the 22nd. They've effectively bought out. They've saved him 20 innings by skipping those couple of starts, and then he's ready to go.
Well, I like the theory, and the Twins are definitely not afraid. In May and in June, the coaches, the organization are having conversations with all of their starting pitchers, seeing where they're at, and most often they do skip 1 start, or even 2 starts, just to kind of, 1, limit innings, 2, to kind of give them that fresh start again in the second half. So I don't necessarily disagree with that sentiment, and if the plan is to get him 2 more starts in Rochester, I wouldn't necessarily even be surprised or say that's a bad thing. And I think maybe saying it's a calf injury is wise. But, at the same time, the reason I'm hesitant to believe that is just because why a calf or why have him miss the Futures game for a fake injury? I'm not saying it's fake.
His rehab schedule is not based on the Futures game, which I thought it very well could be when originally. The rehab schedule is based on when the Twins want him in their rotation.
Yeah, maybe. Seems a little weird to me. I'm thinking you're grasping at straws here, but I think in theory we have the same thought, which is he probably makes a couple more starts at Rochester and then comes up for the rest of the season.
Yes, I agree. Let's move on. Tell me about Vance Worley. I didn't read the thing because I'm not going to spend time on Vance Worley, but you read an article. I think it was a Howard Sinker article. Tell us about it.
Yeah, and it came from a Philadelphia Daily News article where Vance Worley basically talked about how once he got to the Pirates, and he, of course, spent some time at extended spring training, and their whole thing was, let's get you right before we just throw you back into AAA or whatever the case may be. And while he was there, one of the coaches down at extended spring training kind of watched his mechanics and said, "Are you still hurt?" Because he was pitching as if he was still hurt. And he said, "No, the arm feels fine." And they said, "Well, your mechanics are that of someone who's still hurt. So you need to just do this and whatever that is." And he started airing it out just like he had previously. And obviously his success at AAA and through his first 4 or 5 starts with the Pittsburgh Pirates have been, pretty successful. Some of that may be going back to the National League, but in general, he's pitching well. So, of course, again, The Twins audience, of course, wants to have Rick Anderson fired for this, and the front office fired for trading him away. And I've never been a big Rick Anderson guy. I thought he got a ton of credit early in his time with the Twins for kind of finding appropriate roles for guys like LaTroy Hawkins and Eddie Guardado and kind of cleaning their mechanics up and getting them to be quality major league pitchers. And I'm not one of those that says, he couldn't do anything with Kyle Loesch or, it was his decision to get rid of Matt Garza or some of that. A lot of guys succeed after changing teams due to change of scenery or just somebody finding something. I think there's been equal or very close to as many situations with Rick Anderson where a pitcher has been better with him than with other, coaches or teams as well. So I don't think it's a big deal, but I do think that enough of these things are kind of starting to pile up. And it kind of goes back to our earlier discussion. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we kind of glossed by it earlier. I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of the season, Terry Ryan goes to Ron Gardenhire and says, we need to make a change of pitching coach. And if that happens, I think Ron Gardenhire resigns.
Right.
So, I mean, to me, that's what's going to happen. Terry Ryan's going to say we have to make a change at the pitching coach level, that personnel person. And I think there would be more coaches that would go to, and I honestly think that's when Ron Gardenhire would say, you know what, that's it for me too. I think he would make that decision.
Yeah, and that's interesting because it's just interesting. Now, I think here's the concern that Twins fans would have. And this is getting way off track, but if Rick Anderson's gone, whether Gardy's gone or not, does the next pitching coach come from inside, or would the organization go outside?
Well, I mean, we've heard tremendous things about what Marty Mason's doing in Rochester. I did a story on AJ Octor a week or two ago, and I specifically asked him about Marty Mason and what he does, what his role is with that Rochester team that is pitching tremendously well in the International League, starters and relievers, and those pitchers there really respect what he's doing. And his mannerisms and all that he knows and the little intricacies that he's able to find. So, I mean, I think if there is someone within the organization that could take over as the pitching coach, Marty Mason might be it. But I think a lot would depend on where the managerial situation went. I mean, if Gardy just stayed and it was just Rick Anderson, I could see someone like Mason coming up. If they went with an entirely different manager, I mean, all bets are off at that point.
I tweeted a link or retweeted a story, and I don't know when this was, but it was a story about Marty Mason. Did you happen to read that story?
I did not.
It was a Mike Berardino article, as a matter of fact. I'm finding it. And it talked about just kind of how he's thinking. And there was a lot of stuff from Gene Glenn and Marty Mason, and stuff from Kyle Gibson about how Gibson was a big fan of him too.
Yep.
So I'm going to retweet that link. It's about the Trevor May throwing 120 pitches, and there was some, I don't know if outcry or I think there was some frustration. But let me just send that out if people want to read that. It was a good article, and it made you think that just how people look at things compared to another person. That a lot of things could change, a lot of things could be different.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I've had a chance to kind of meet and talk with some of the pitching coaches throughout the organization. I mean, I have a ton of respect for what Gary Lucas has done in his time, both at Beloit and Cedar Rapids in the Midwest League, and now this year again with Fort Myers. I mean, he's seen some guys and really helped them develop. I just, in fact, talked to Mr. Lucas tonight for about a half an hour about some of the pitchers that have been there and have now moved forward into Double-A and then the progressions that they've made. And I got a chance last week in Cedar Rapids to spend 15 minutes with Ivan Arteaga, who was in Fort Myers last year and is in Cedar Rapids this year. And Man, the thing with those guys is they have such a knowledge and such a passion. I mean, when you hear them talk about baseball and pitching and the details and seeing a guy like J.O. Barrios improve, or I talked to him about Mason Malatakis and others, you see that improvement. And when I talked to Artiaga, we talked about Lewis Thorpe quite a bit. I mean, you can just see that these guys, one, know what they're talking about technically and mechanically, but two, their excitement and their enthusiasm rubs off, and that's the kind of energy that I think Twins fans would like and appreciate. Now, Lucas had an 8-year major league career as a relief pitcher. I don't know if Marty Mason spent any time in the big leagues. If so, very little. And Ivan Arteaga just pitched minor league ball for a few years, I think before injury. But these aren't big names that are going to excite a fan base to say, we got the guy now. But I mean, I would certainly be behind any of those guys.
Right. Let's move forward here. We are a little bit behind our scripted time here. Sunday afternoon. Yeah, Sunday evening, the All-Star teams were announced, and the Twins got two players, Kurt Suzuki and Glenn Perkins. We've been making our All-Star game predictions on a almost weekly basis here for a while, and we both, I believe, had Perkins. You had Dozier in the final vote. We both had Hughes out, and I think we didn't necessarily have Suzuki in, but knew that a lot of people were giving him consideration. Anyway, those are the two that are in. How surprised are you?
Well, I mean, I'd like to think, and I'm obviously not going to look back. Maybe somebody listening can remind us, but I think I did, and I thought you agreed that we both last week said Perkins and Suzuki would be the two that were in, and I think last week we both decided that Dozier and Hughes would be out. So I think we were both right. Someone can verify that for us, but I was not surprised at all. With Matt Wieters being the one that got the vote, or the won the vote, and him being out with Tommy John surgery this whole year, there was room at catcher. And the fact is, Salvador Perez is awesome, and Kurt Suzuki's having a terrific year. So I think some might be surprised that Suzuki made it, but I don't think we would be. Perkins was kind of borderline as well, and I don't think either of us are surprised that he made it either. Dozier, I think we all wanted to see, but as much as batting average doesn't matter and shouldn't matter, it does matter when you're going up against so many good players. When you consider Ian Kinsler isn't on this roster as a second baseman, it's hard to feel bad for Brian Dozier. There's Robinson Cano and Jose Altuve is hitting 350, and who's the other one that made it? I don't know if Pedroia even made it. But, there's just so much competition. It's hard to say he got snubbed. He may be anywhere from the third to fifth best second baseman in a position where you're going to get three guys. So, and then Phil Hughes, I think his struggles the last few weeks, his ERA is now at just above league average. So, that's just not going to compete with the likes of Felix Hernandez and Masahiro Tanaka and, some of those top guys that are just putting up insane numbers again. When Chris Sale is on the vote, then, we're not going to complain much about Phil Hughes not making it.
Right. No, I didn't.
Or I'm not.
After Hughes' last couple starts, he didn't really have a shot. And I think Roy Smalley said it right before the game started tonight that maybe Hughes had a little case of all-star-itis where he was pressing and wanted to be named to the All-Star game. I don't know. They're professionals. But maybe, that could be something. So Perkins is probably going to get his first All-Star game. He's going to throw his first pitch in the All-Star game. Suzuki also making his first appearance. Perkins was named last year but didn't pitch. After the All-Star game, and this is where I'm going to try to turn things all into one, the trade deadline is not far away. And the Twins, at this point, are looking to be sellers. They've dropped to, I think, 3.5 games up on the Astros for the first pick. So they've dropped. They are currently, I believe, in last place in the Central, and have already made it known. Apparently, it's been written about nationally. John Heyman wrote it on Saturday that after the All-Star break, the Twins will be looking to move, and the names that he mentioned were Willingham and Correa. And the name that he didn't mention, but maybe the name that has the most value, is Kurt Suzuki. Now, there's been some people on Twitter that are shocked that the Twins could consider moving Suzuki. Uh, I guess my theory is he's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, unless the Twins sign him to an extension. So either the Twins can lock him up, which is great, or he can be a free agent and the Twins can look to re-sign him. Which, if he likes it here as much as people claim he does, he'll re-sign. He's got value right now. And if a team comes calling, and I'm not saying that they're gonna offer a top 100 prospect, but you can get, if you need a catcher, you could get a decent prospect for Kurt Suzuki. That team's not going to try to lock him into an extension because they're probably a team that has an injured catcher right now, like Matt Wieters, or just needs a fill-in for 3 months, and then the Twins can re-sign him. And if they sign him in 1 week to a 2-year extension for $6 million or $8 million, that would be a bad deal. But if they were able to trade him for a prospect and then come back in the offseason and sign him to that exact same deal, great. I'm all for that. How do you think this is all going to play out?
I mean, I'm 100% on board with what you said about Suzuki, as we talked about last week. I think that's a great idea. I don't know if it'll happen. It has happened before, as we talked about with Rick Aguilera. It'd be great because you could get the player, bring him in for 2 years, as I've talked about. I don't know that the Twins have a guy that they could call a starting catcher potentially until Stuart Turner, which is probably 2 years out. So I'd like to see him come back for 2 years at a decent wage, and used wisely, not used every day, just to maybe make sure that he can continue to play well at the plate and behind the plate. But the guy that I don't think has been talked about much is Kendry Morales, and I think when he signed with the Twins, I think a lot of people thought that he would be a guy that would be a great trade chip down the line. Now, he hasn't hit the way we think he can. I mean, you consider he's only been around for a month, and he hadn't played for 2 months before that or longer. So I would expect there would definitely be some interest in Kendry Morales as well. Willingham can bring in a prospect or two, and I think Correa can bring a prospect. None of those prospects that they can get for any of those 4 players will probably be even top 20 prospects for the Twins. Certainly not top 10 guys who would bust the Twins' top 10. The Twins' top 10 prospects are too strong. And people will probably be disappointed in what they get for those guys. But my theory on that is always you're either going to get something, and if that something's a C prospect, that's better than nothing. And at the end of the day, why not add some guys? I mean, that just makes sense. It's always good to have depth, even if those guys never make it. One of them does. I mean, if you can get something, and the Twins have always done a decent job of getting some decent players for who are lesser knowns when they acquire them.
Right. The other guy that came up obviously in Heyman's article, as well as today on ESPN.com, Jim Bowden had a GM's corner and had a what would it take for the Twins to give up Willingham, and he didn't say anything groundbreaking. He matched them up with 3 teams. I want to say it was the Reds, the Royals, and the I can't even think of the third team, but it was essentially he flipped to the back part of Baseball America's handbook and found a pitcher, and I did a little looking, and the team that I found that matched up pretty well was the Royals, and the 2 prospects that I found were one guy that he was ranked in the late teens, I believe. He's pitching right now at low A, and I think his record's 0-5, but he strikes guys out. I think he's like 19. He for me was the right-handed version of Randy Rosario. 6-footer, undersized, and then there's a double A reliever that strikes guys out. Those are the types of guys you're looking for. You're going to get in these trades. These are not going to be, the Addison Russells aren't getting moved for junk. So, if you've heard of the prospect, the likelihood is that he's probably a little too good for the types of guys the Twins have to offer, and that's not a problem because these guys are going to hit the market anyway. So the thing that it does is it opens up your 40-man a little bit earlier. These guys are going to be off the 40-man, but if you want to get a look at a guy in September, now's your chance to do it, whereas before with your Willinghams and your Correas with those guys on the 40-man, you just can't do it. So the Mariners were actually the team that matched up well, and that was the third team that he mentioned in that article as well. So, but yeah, you're getting a guy that probably wouldn't fit into the Twins' top 30 prospects, and that's more a testament. Well, it's both a testament to the Twins system as well as a realization that the Twins aren't getting anything great back for a 3-month rental of a player that's really not very good.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the reality. I mean, you can throw a name out there, and I like that. That's the type of guy that I would want to get. I mean, it was like last year getting Miguel Subban for Drew Butera, and Subban was a young guy. I think he was 19 or 20 at the time, who had, basically had a strikeout per inning as a lefty in the Midwest League. And that's the type of guy you're going to get. I think he was in the low to mid-20s in our prospect rankings after this season last year. And they turned him into Eduardo Nunez, which I would say is a pretty good swap at the end of the day. If you're going to get a guy who can play 5 positions for a guy you had as your number 3 catcher for most of the year last year. Obviously, it was a good deal for the Dodgers, too, because they've got their number 1 catcher, too, who does a pretty nice job with the Kershaws and Beckett's and Greinke's of the world, and Ryu as well. So, those are the types of deals you're going to get. Teams are going to be interested in Willingham and Morales if they need someone who can hit the occasional home run, or be old enough in Willingham's case where he's going to be able to come off the bench and provide some power. Morales can be a DH in the middle of the lineup, and the Twins are getting him some time at first base, obviously because of the Mauer injury. That gives him a little value too. And the other thing, I guess, Correa is going to get something. The Twins should get something for Correa. Has been terrific for the last month and a half. It's not going to be a big prospect, but I think he's put himself. He's pitched pretty well for the year and a half he's been with the Twins, minus a handful of starts or two. The other thing I'd mention too is what they do with guys in the bullpen. There's guys like Brian Dunston and Anthony Swarzak, and maybe Jared Burton, who could be traded for anything as well. There's guys that other teams that are winning and are contending would be interested in. A guy like Brian Dunston has a ton of value to a team as a left-handed reliever who's done it for a long time. Jared Burton's had his ups and downs, but he's had a great track record over time. You're not going to get even probably a C prospect for a guy like Burton, but you might get a C prospect or two for a guy like Dunston. There's guys. I think the Twins will be active at the deadline.
See, now, you may have been sleeping or just not on Twitter. Maybe you were gone still when I had my little relief pitcher rant. If I was constructing a baseball team, which, I do fantasy baseball, but it's a little bit different. I would never invest in a relief pitcher because a majority, and it's not just a majority, it's almost every single stinking one is a failed starter.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm Terry Ryan and I get a phone call that, hey, we'll give you this guy for Jared Burton, done.
Yep.
If they called and said, we'll give you this guy for Casey Fien, I might drive the price up a little bit on Fien because I think he's an 8th or 9th inning guy that can do it for a couple of years, and he's still controlled for actually quite a while. But anybody in that bullpen is available. With the exception of I'm not going to trade Glenn Perkins because of who Glenn Perkins is, and I'm not going to give Fien away. But I wouldn't give any one of those other guys away because at the end of the day, the guys that are in AAA, the starters and the relievers in AAA, they could probably be just as good of a bullpen. And there's guys in Double A that I wouldn't mind seeing long term in this bullpen. And to pay Brian Dunsing a couple $1 million, I just wouldn't do it. I mean, Chris Johnson could be Brian Dunsing next year for league minimum. Logan Darnell could be better than Brian Dunsing next year for league minimum. And it's not taking anything away from Brian Dunsing, but he's a failed starter, and I'm not going to invest any money at all into guys that fail the starters. And you kind of get that same thing where guys say, well, middle relievers shouldn't be in the All-Star game. They shouldn't be. They're not good enough to close. Then they're just another pitcher, and great for Pat Neshek, but I wouldn't do it. I would never have a middle reliever in an All-Star game. I would never invest any amount of money into a middle reliever. You're either a failed starter or you're a failed closer. And while they have value, the value to me is league minimum, and that's it. So if they're calling on Burton and they're calling on Dunsing and they're calling on Swarzak, I am listening and I'm pulling the trigger as fast as I possibly can, because we'll find someone else to fill those roles.
I'm generally in agreement with that thought process. And on Dunsing and Burton, especially, even Swarzak, if someone calls and offers a decent amount, or even just something, I'd say yes. Fiend's a guy that I think is interesting because he's not expensive and he won't be expensive for a couple of years, and I think he's done something that he seems pretty legit. So I'd kind of stick by him, for another year or two. He doesn't cost much, but unless you're overwhelmed. As far as your comment on relievers being failed starters, generally that's the case. Obviously, a guy like Neshek never did start. Another guy that made the All-Star team, Dellin Betances, certainly hasn't been given a chance yet to be a closer, and his numbers are so unruly and ungodly that he absolutely deserves to be an All-Star. I would say he's better than Dave Robinson. I think the whole closer versus eighth inning man they're the same, in my opinion. I mean, Casey Fiend's been just as good this year as Glenn Perkins and wouldn't have been considered for the All-Star team, but he's been just as good as Glenn Perkins. And that's, again, not a slap at Glenn Perkins, who's been very good, but Casey Fiend's been just as good. So I guess I'm in agreement with a lot of what you're saying, and obviously I'm one that gets beat up a lot for not putting relief pitchers very high in my prospect rankings. But at the same time, I understand their value, especially when they're not pitching well. We all see it when they're not pitching well. But I would certainly, and the reason I threw it out there, because those are the types of guys that have crazy value at July. It's always amazing to me what a solid left-handed relief pitcher can get an organization, and not so much anymore. But 5 years ago, man, people would give up the world for a decent left-handed pitcher. I mean, the Twins gave up. Never mind. Let's not go back to
that. Betances, let's talk about him for a second because you brought him up. You said he hasn't got a chance to close, but he made 122 starts in the minor leagues in 124 appearances. That was 6 games through last year. He had a 6 ERA as a starter in AAA in the International League before he was shifted to the bullpen.
Yep.
Where he's now been freaking awesome. Nasty. Ridiculous. But what is he? I mean, he's a failed starter, and he failed in AAA. And now he's a shutdown, nasty, nasty reliever.
Right, because he has 2 pitches and lack of control. I mean, so there's a role, and in my opinion, and it goes back to this, in my opinion. If setup men, that's a role now. That's a job. That's a job that people make some money at, and it's pretty important. The 8th inning guy and the 9th inning guy, I mean, they're all important, and obviously we both agree that the guy that can get you through 6 or 7 is much more important, but the role of setup man is now a huge role in Major League Baseball, and I have no problem with one of them being an all-star if they're putting up Betances-like numbers.
No, and in that particular
or
case,
Neshek type numbers.
See, Betances for me would be a closer, or he'd be a starter. I'm not gonna waste that in a year or in an inning, but that's a story for a different time. Let's move on to the futures game, and just remind everybody what's going on Sunday afternoon. Joe Barrios, who was recently promoted to New Britain, Kenny Vargas, who is currently on the inactive list at New Britain, and Alex Meyer will all be at the Futures game. Barrios and Vargas representing the World team, managed by the Twins' own Bert Blyleven. And then the U.S. team managed by Tom Kelly will include Alex Meyer.
Well, first of all, we should congratulate Kenneth Vargas and his wife on the birth of their daughter today. Camilla, very cute, very exciting. So that's the reason. I know a lot of people were wondering why he was on the temporary inactive list. That doesn't always come with a positive thing. But obviously we've known for a while he was going to have to head down to New Britain at some point. Or I'm sorry, head down to Puerto Rico at some point to be with his wife, who, again, just had their first child. So very exciting for him. All three of these guys very deserving. Especially Vargas and Barrios has been unbelievable. Trevor May, as we mentioned earlier, was a replacement for Marco Gonzalez, who got called up by the Cardinals. He's recently been optioned, in fact, I think in the last couple of days. And then May got hurt, and they're kind of nice to the Twins and had Alex Meyer replace him. And, I mean, to me, that's pretty exciting. Those are three guys that are worth watching.
Yeah, and I'm going to just jump off topic, or not so much off topic, but off script. Baseball Prospectus and Baseball America both released their top 50 yesterday, I think. And I never saw the Baseball Prospectus top 50. I never saw where the guys were placed. But as far as where they were placed in Baseball America, Buxton remained 1. Sano was 9. And I believe the three pitchers that we knew were going to be in there, Barrios, Stewart, and Meyer, were ranked 27, 29, and 32 in that order. So according to the Baseball America top 50, midseason top 50, they would have Barrios as their number 3 Twins prospect. They would have Cole Stewart as their 4, and they would have Alex Meyer as their 5. How would you have it, Seth?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this over the last couple of months, and, obviously when Alex Meyer was pitching great early on in the season, he was a guy that we actually might have considered jumping up to number 2 over the injured Miguel Sano at times. And obviously he's been struggling for the last month, and that's the timing of this report. And frankly, J.O. Barrios at 20 just dominated the Florida State League. So I think part of it might be the timing of it. But also I think more and more people are coming around to the fact that J.O. Barrios is pretty good. When you've got the velocity that he's got, when you've got the command that he's got, and you've got the stuff that he's got, 3 legit big league type of pitches, it's pretty exciting. The thing, I mean, he's such a mature kid. He's just 20. He just turned 20 in May. And he's so mature. I mean, there's so many things to like about him. The only thing that people have against him is his height. And there's plenty of examples. There's a lot of, obviously, examples that didn't make it. Most prospects don't at the end of the day. But there's enough examples of guys that were 6 feet or shorter that succeeded to some level that, that shouldn't be the final factor. I mean, that might be the reason why he's at 27 instead of, 15. But at the end of the day, does 27 versus 32 versus 30 versus 48, versus 61, really make a huge difference? It really doesn't. But I mean, all 3 of them are terrific, and it's a coin flip at this point.
Let's do this. I'm going to put you on the spot. I want your predictions for debut days of a few different guys, and I'm going to write it down on this handy-dandy little piece of paper. They're going to all be pitchers. Okay?
Yeah.
Major league debut. Okay?
Yep.
Trevor May.
July 28th.
Okay?
We have a plus or minus 4 in this, don't we, for time in the rotation?
I'll give you plus or minus a week.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Alex Meyer.
September 7th.
J.O. Barrios.
This one might need if I'm within a week on this, that'll be pretty impressive. I will say May 15th, 2016.
Okay. Cole Stewart.
Cole Stewart, I will say June the 13th. I got to come up with a year. Give me a second here. 2007. No. Give me August 28th, 2017.
Okay. And just for fun, Nick Birdie.
I will take May the 10th, 2015.
Okay.
What are your dates on those? You had plenty of time while I was thinking about Cole Stewart's date.
Trevor May, give me 7/22/14 because I think that's going to happen. I'm going to go with Alex Meyer. See, here's the thing. I think that Gardy would like him in the bullpen, and I think he'd like him in the bullpen this year. But at this point, there's no reason to have him in the bullpen. So I'm gonna wait until next year, and I'm gonna go 6/1/15 on him, which seems
Okay.
like a long time away, and I freaking hope I'm wrong. I really do. But I'm gonna go with that. But I'm also gonna go with a little shocker here with my boy Jo, and I'm gonna give him a debut of 7/4/2015. That's less than a year.
Wow. So he'll be about 2 weeks after Alex Meyer.
I have him a month behind Meyer.
Wow.
And here's why I'm doing it. Because when I was at the game on Saturday, I tweeted that I thought he would make his big league debut within a year. And that was when he was still in Fort Myers. And then he got promoted like the next day. So I am going to stick with that. Cole Stewart, on the other hand, okay, let me think here. He's going to spend 14 in Cedar Rapids. He's going to spend 15 in Fort Myers. He's going to spend 16 in New Britain. He's going to spend 17. I'm going to go with 5/27/17 because that's my birthday.
I went with 5/15 on one of those because that's my daughter's birthday. So.
Fair enough. Nick
Hey,
Bird,
by the way, those of you listening, I'm sure this has been exhilarating, and maybe you had a pen to write this down. Jeremy, maybe after we're done here, you can go on Twins Daily because I know you're writing these down. Make a forum about this, and we'll get other people. Go there and on the forum, put your dates in there. Obviously, we'll be able to save that. It'll be on the Twins Daily forums for a long time, and every time someone gets called up, we can take a look and see who was the closest.
that sounds great. I will do that. For Nick Birdie, I'm taking opening day 2014. 50.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Okay, I'm good with that.
OD 2015. Yeah, we'll throw that up. Now, let's do some minor league update now that it's 10 o'clock.
Okay.
We'll start with Rochester. Here's what I'm. You know what? Why don't you do your players of the month first?
Players of the month. Well, one of them hasn't actually been posted yet. Hopefully, will be tomorrow here. But I'll even give you guys that are listening to this a little preview. I think it should be called the AJ Octor Award at this point because he was again terrific and will be the winner of that. He was the minor league reliever of the year 2 years ago. I think he was the runner-up last year, and I think he's won it 2 out of 3 months so far this year. He's just been tremendous. And last week he was named the Red Wings lone All-Star representative. Following him, I had Edgar Ibarra from Rochester, Lester Oliveros at New Britain, and finally got that promotion to Rochester. Ryan O'Rourke has been just tremendous as a lefty at New Britain, and Todd Van Steensel at Cedar Rapids. He's now been promoted to the Fort Myers Miracle, where they were rained out tonight. As far as the other ones, Jay Oberrios was the easy choice at starting pitcher. He was the Twins' choice for pitcher of the month. He was the Florida State League pitcher of the month. I mean, he was just incredible. And after that, you see a lot more guys with ties to Gary Lucas and those Fort Myers Miracle. Jason Wheeler was the runner-up, also at Fort Myers, but he got 3 starts as well at New Britain and was fine there. Matt Tomshaw, we've seen on this list, he was the winner in May. Taylor Rogers, number 4, he was tremendous in New Britain. And then Cole Stewart I had at number 5. Guys like Trevor May, Pat Dean, and Tim Shibuya were also very good. And then finally, the hitter of the month of June, it's hard to go against Reynaldo Rodriguez, and that was posted today at Twins Daily, so feel free to take a look at the reasoning, the numbers, and get your comments in. He's just been tremendous at New Britain. We talked about him last week, and if he'll get a chance to move up to Rochester at some point. Chad Christensen, the athletic utility player from Cedar Rapids, had a terrific month. He was number 2. Former golfer Mike Kwasnick has been just on fire the last month and a half. He was number 3. Chris Colabello as number 4. He took him a little while to get going at Rochester, but he figured things out, and he's definitely earned a spot in the top list for June, and also that promotion back to the Twins, where he's been terrific the last week. And then other guys that were considered, Chris Herman was very good at Rochester. Dave Benson Romero again at Rochester. Nate Hansen got a promotion to Rochester halfway through the month. Kenneth Vargas got honorable mention at New Britain. Jorge Polanco was good again, even though he missed some time due to being in the major leagues. He was very good at Fort Myers. And then Stuart Turner kind of finally broke in to the list and had a good month. So there's the list of guys for the player of the month of June. As we sit here in the beginning of July, it was a good month for the organization. A lot of guys that were up for consideration for those awards.
Yeah, that was it was a good month, and just doing the minor league report once a week, I saw a lot of those guys. The one hitter that you didn't mention, Max Murphy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the only reason those guys weren't mentioned was because the extended season started, I think, June 19th or something like that, towards the end of the month. So it was really just a matter of number of plate appearances. But, yeah, there were some guys that at Elizabeth and have just been hitting the ball well, Max Murphy being the right example.
Yeah, Max Murphy's been ridiculous.
Yep.
And it's funny because we talked about it on here a couple weeks ago where I said they should just move him up. And you're like, no. They'll just let him play there, and then they'll move him up next year. And then you tweet last night that he should just get moved up. So.
Well, right, and I mean that's the difference that 2 weeks can make. We're talking about, a series of 7 games or 6 games that he's played in, and now he's got 3+ weeks. So where he is a college guy. I think he's a 4-year college guy, and I think he's going to be fine. There's nothing wrong with keeping him there, but if there were a need at Cedar Rapids, I mean, that probably is the first guy to get called up, although, Tanner English also just signed, about a week ago, and he's hit a couple home runs and really hit pretty well as well. There's a lot of guys doing well at Elizabeth. And
yeah, we'll get more to them in a little bit. Let's just start at the top of the chain with the Red Wings here. The Rochester Red Wings, and I'm just going to go over the transactions. Today, with Herman going up to the big club, Josemiel Pinto was activated. Mark Hamburger's kind of been bounced back and forth. He is up and currently in a starting role. And I believe Nate Hansen was promoted before our last show, but if we didn't mention him last week, we should mention that the hometown boy is up one step away now from the major league. So, Seth, tell us a little bit more about Rochester.
Well, I mean, tonight was pretty important because Alex Meyer made the start, and he's finally back. He had the 3 state starts where he had 3 innings pitched, or a total of 6.2 innings or something over 3 total starts, but tonight he was able to go to 99 pitches. He went 6 innings, gave up just 2 runs on 4 hits. He did walk 4, but he also struck out 10. So a good start from Meyer. Edgar Ibarra, 2 shutout innings, and Ryan Presley with a shutout inning. So that's an encouraging night tonight. They won 3-2 over Buffalo. They're 53-40 right now, and Doug Bernier just continues to hit. I mean, he's back around 300 again. Tonight he was 2 for 4 with his 15th double. He drove in a couple of runs. And people will be excited to know tonight Pedro Florimon was 1 for 2 with a walk, and he scored 2 runs. So people should be very excited about that.
Who do you think plays shortstop for the Twins first, Bernier or Flourmont?
Well, Flourmont's still on the 40-man roster, so unfortunately, I think that's the answer. I think Doug Bernier has actually earned that opportunity again. It'd be hard to disagree with him getting another opportunity.
But let's say in the event that Escobar gets hurt, Santana's not back yet. If you need to plug someone into that position every day, or at least every day that you're not going to let Nunez do it, wouldn't you rather have Bernier up? I mean, the guy's had a terrific year.
Yeah, I mean, I would rather have Bernier up. I don't think that's what they do, just again because of the business side of it and the fact that he's not on the 40-man roster. The easy way to combat that would be to take Florimon off the 40-man roster to put Doug Bernier on. But, Bernier understands that he's 33, 34 years old. Florimon, for all of his flaws, is still, I think, just 27 years old, and he does play a pretty good defense at short, as does Bernier. So I understand the business side of it. I would have no problem with them giving Doug Bernier another opportunity, and even an opportunity to play on a semi-regular basis.
Yeah, I tweeted last night or maybe a couple nights ago that the Twins could have a ton of room on their 40-man roster. Doug Bernier is the type of guy that I wouldn't mind seeing them add at some point. I mean, obviously he'll be a minor league free agent, but I would assume that they'll want to add him at some time. Last year they added him and outrighted him. I would be okay with them adding him and keeping him on there because they know what they're going to get in a guy like that. He's only had one option year so far. I think he was option in 2008, and I don't think he's part of a long-term solution. But I think he would be. I think he is a good guy to have around younger players, and I think there's something to be said about that. And doesn't he have like an off-season job where he helps?
Well, he's got his website, and we can find that again. I did a story for him during spring training. He does a website where he answers kids' questions when they send them in, or adults' questions about baseball, whatever the topics are. Some of it's the mental side, some of it's the mechanical side, some of it's equipment and that kind of stuff. So I think he and his wife both do a good job with that website. I think with him, I'd have no problem him being added, especially maybe after some of those trades. And if they have some less guys on the 40-man roster, a guy like that, let him come up and play for those last two months of the year. If and when I say play, I mean obviously Danny Santana is going to play ahead of him, but be on the roster, be the backup, be the guy on the bench who's going to cheer on his teammates, and when he comes in, he's going to be okay. He'll be solid. You mentioned keeping him on the 40-man roster. I wouldn't do that. He's not the kind of guy, and especially at his age, that's going to get a major league contract. I don't think anyone's going to claim him in the off season. He's the kind of guy that you could bring back again next year on the same contract, a minor league deal with a spring invite, because he's going to know that if he plays like he has played, he's going to get an opportunity if he earns it. I mean, to me, there's value in that. They're not the guys that are starters, and they're not the guys you're going to build an organization on, but every team needs those types of guys at AAA who can come up when needed.
Maybe I got a little too excited there.
Well, and I mean, it's something we should talk about maybe over the, in a month or maybe after the trade deadline, is the guys that are eligible to be added to the 40-man roster, because that's going to play into it too. And who's going to be potentially eligible to be drafted in the selected in the Rule 5 draft in November. That all plays into whether or not he would be kept on there as well.
Can I spoil you and tell you there's not many guys worth adding this year?
Well, but there's some big names this year, and unless they get called up before the season's over, which is very possible with some of them, there's some big names. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
If you want to check that out on the Twins roster and payroll page, you can look at what's on there now. You can also click on the link that'll bring you to a Google document that has everything, and then eventually the whole RMP page will look entirely different, and that's kind of exciting, but kind of something that I'm not going to talk too much about. But yeah, you can view all that stuff there under the Rule 5. The people that say 2014 are guys that would need to be added to not be exposed this year. Let's move to New Britain Things that have
Jeremy,
happened
can
on
I
the
just take 1 second?
yes.
Real quickly, I mean, AJ Octor was the lone guy on the roster that made the AAA All-Star team, and he's been wonderful. 1.65 ERA, 42 strikeouts to 14 walks and 43.2 innings, 4 for 4 in save opportunities, a .76 WHIP. I think opponents are hitting like 0 against him. But it's kind of surprising too that he was the only representative when you consider that Chris Johnson's 8-4 with a 2.75 ERA. Alex Myers struggled of late, but 5-4, 3.43 ERA. Logan Darnell, 3.15 ERA. Trevor May, 2.894 ERA. Johan Pino, of course, probably makes it if he's there. And guys like Ryan Presley and Edgar Ibarra and Aaron Thompson. And I mean, there's so many guys that I think are worthy of a all-star spot at that AAA team. And it's unfortunate that just one made it, especially for a team that's now 53-40. But I mean, at the end of the day, these guys are all guys that could contribute to the Twins, and I just think it's important to note that although they were a big topic earlier in the year, they've continued to pitch pretty well. And when the Twins do have a need, there's some guys there that they can go get. That was my only little bit that I had to add before we move forward.
Speaking of AJ Octor, he sent me his E-Town cap autographed, so I got that hanging in my house.
You showed it on the show one time, I believe.
I did, and I would show it too, but I would have to stand up and walk like 8 feet. I'm not gonna do it. Let's move over to the Rock Cats. The news in the Rock Cats world is Miguel Sano was cleared to begin his throwing program. That was news yesterday. Today, pregame, the word came out that he will not be resuming game activities until December. So any hope of DHing in a low-level minor league game, not going to happen. Any hope of him participating in the Arizona Fall League, not going to happen. In fact, his first month in the Dominican Winter League is now wiped out. And, as a fan, I would like to see Sano back. But as a guy that's, semi-invested in how the Twins do, I'd rather he just get healthy. So being overly cautious is the right thing to do, in my opinion. But that's obviously the big news right now on that roster.
I'm right there with you. I'd love to see him. They had originally said, well, it's possible he could DH maybe in the GCL or maybe Fort Myers towards the end of the year. And maybe they could have done that. I know the Twins, there's some people that I've talked to and others that I've seen on Twitter saying that, it's just them being ultra-conservative again. Well, when you've got a guy that's a legitimate consensus top 10 prospect in all of baseball, I would certainly be a little conservative as well. It's more important that he be ready next year than it is that he be ready in August of this year or even November or October of this year. Much more important that he be ready. Maybe we should add this. I mean, we kind of thought that he would probably be up by early May of this year. I still think it's a legitimate time frame for him to be up by mid to late May, maybe early June next year. If I were to put a date on it like we were doing before,
Do it. I'm writing it down.
I'd probably put like June 10th, or maybe I'd move it to June 25th so that it was on my birthday. I'll put June 25th since I get a week of next year.
June 25th, 2015.
2015 for Miguel Sano, yep.
I am going to go with. Hold on, I got to do a little research.
It's a live show, by the way. It's fun to watch you or listen to you do live research, I'm sure, for our listeners.
I just want to find a date because I think the Twins will not be as conservative as the Pirates were with Polanco. But I'm going to put the same date as he debuted only 1 year later. So Gregory Polanco made his debut on June 10th. So I'm going with June 10th of 2015.
June 10th. So we got a 2-week separation there. And the only reason I moved mine from June 10th to June 25th was so that it would be on my birthday.
Is that what the day you said first was June 10th?
Yeah, but then I moved it back because I wanted to get it on my birthday.
Okay, well, I took your day.
Hey, can I just completely sidetrack the conversation here for just 1 second?
Your show.
Hey, I just was on Twitter looking at things, and Gopher Hole, which you can follow, of course, at Gopher Hole or gopherhole.com, just posted Grandpa Jake Maurer on Joe Maurer, quote unquote. He's getting a big salary, comma. He should produce, and then unquote, and then it said he should maybe be benched. So that's nice of his grandpa to say.
Let me take that sidetrack one step further. Um, when what's his face for ESPN did the homecoming, Rick Riley,
hmm
I went to that. I went to the Joe Mauer homecoming at Cretin Durham Hall High School,
This is
and
scaring me of which story you're about to tell.
and Jake Mauer, Grandpa Jake, was so oblivious to the fact that this was for TV that he couldn't like. There was a couple times that Rick Riley just stopped him from talking to explain to him that he had to stand on his X and look at the camera, and he would turn and start talking to the audience and telling stories, and Rick would be like, Jake, and then they'd cut, and then he'd be like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I will talk to anybody that will listen, and I'm fairly certain that someone was listening if they're putting a story together. And yeah, I think he's critical of his kid, the grandkid, but at the same time, he just wants people to listen to him, and he was given a stage, and he's going to perform. So that is interesting, and you know, good to talk about. But Joe Mauer's not getting benched.
Right, right. So back
Uh,
to New Britain. Sorry
yeah.
about that. I think we've exhausted the Miguel Sano. I think we're both in agreement that conservative is wise.
So move over. J.O. Barrios will pitch tomorrow night. He'll make his Double-A debut on Wednesday. That'll be fantastic. Mason Malatakis is also up, lefty reliever who's been very good. They've also added Lance Ray, who spent basically the last 13 years at Fort Myers, and Jairo Rodriguez, who's been basically catching at every affiliate over the last handful of years. And Kenneth Vargas, like you mentioned earlier, is home in Puerto Rico.
Right. I mean, I actually really think that Lance Ray is one to watch, and I say that not because he's a high level prospect. He's an outfielder who can play some first base, but this guy can hit. He's been hurt the last year and a half, which is unfortunate because when he is healthy, I mean, he's got a sweet left-handed swing that produces some pop in it, and he already had a day yesterday, I think, where he had a double and a triple in Double A, and he's 2 for 9 so far, which is not worth worrying about. Although there's 5 strikeouts in those 9 plate appearances, but he's got some pop in his bat. So you give him a little bit of time there to kind of get things rolling, and I'm just curious if he's able to take that step to Double A. As we talked about a little off record or off before the show, I did talk to Miracle pitching coach Gary Lucas before the show. Just a great conversation, and a lot of it was about J.O. Barrios and moving up, and Mason Malatakis. And I just asked him the question. I go, in your mind, is J.O. Barrios ready for this move to Fort Myers? And obviously, it's not just him. It's not just Doug Minkiewicz. It's not just Eric Rasmussen, the pitching coordinator. It's not just Brad Stile. These guys are all talking together and doing what they feel is best for him. And he said the general consensus, is that he's ready. What will he do? How will his pitches work? How will his maturity level? There's a lot of questions about moving a 20-year-old up to Double A to face those guys. The big question is, will they swing at pitches outside the zone? As you move up the levels, hitters aren't swinging at as many pitches outside the zone that maybe they did at an earlier level. And the other thing was, how will they do in the zone? And one thing that Gary said was that this last couple of months, Barrios has been pitching in the zone and getting swings and misses and weak contact. And that's what they wanted to see before getting him promoted. So not only was he getting strikeouts and the numbers are showing up, but he was able to work inside the zone and still get weak contact and swings and misses. So to me, I mean, there's a lot of good things. Mason Malatakis, we talked a little bit about him moving up, and it's not that he's never going to get another chance to start, but he's very comfortable in his role as a reliever. and very successful, and he's throwing hard, and he's got a lot of confidence. But he also feels that time as a starter was very valuable because he added a couple of pitches, and he was able to make some adjustments, and he was able to be more aggressive, and he now has a good changeup and all those different things. So he's the kind of guy that I really think could be, when we talked about the lefty relievers, a guy like Dunsing or a guy like Burton, a guy like Militakis is a guy that could be up within a year too.
For sure. Did they play today?
New Britain played 2 games today. In fact, they won the first game against New Hampshire 10-2. Mike Kwasnicka led the way. He was 3 for 4 with a double. Reynaldo Rodriguez 2 for 3 with a walk and 2 doubles. He's got 28 doubles already this year. Lance Ray had a double and a triple, and Brandon Waring hit his 8th home run. It was a grand slam. They had a bullpen game the first game. Adrian Salcedo threw 2 scoreless. Jim Fuller threw 3 scoreless. And then Cole Johnson gave up 2 in 2 innings, but he struck out 4. In the second game, I got to grab the score here quick. They actually now I don't have it, of course.
While you're looking at that, Salcedo pitched yesterday. He threw his 2 innings yesterday before the game was suspended with rain.
Right, I should have mentioned. It was a doubleheader today because yesterday's game was suspended. But yeah, today I know Tyler Duffy started the second game, and he went 5 1/3, and he gave up 4 runs, 3 of them earned on 8 hits. He walked none, as we wouldn't be surprised, and he struck out 4. Ryan O'Rourke continued to do what he's done all year, and that's he struck out 2 batters in. I'm sorry, he got the 2 batters he faced out, and then Dan Turpin struck out 1 in his scoreless inning. The Rockettes did win 5-4 in that game. Aaron Hicks, for those interested, he went 3 for 4 in the game. And then Mike Kwasnicka he was 2 for 4 with his it was his 7th home run and drove in 2 runs. So a good game for the Rockettes. Got the sweep. They're now sitting actually at 44-44 after this slow start that they got off to. It's good to see them really playing well. They had their 11-game win streak a while back, and they've been able to maintain playing really well. So obviously good news for them. The other news from the Rockettes that I think we should just mention is unlike the, and I don't know if I jotted them down anywhere, but unlike the Rochester Red Wings, who had just 1 member of their roster make the AAA All-Star game, there are 5 New Britain Rockettes going to the Eastern League All-Star game, including Kenneth Vargas, second baseman Tony Thomas, and then pitchers Cole Johnson, and you might have to help me out here since I'm not remembering.
Give me a second.
I know I've got it here. This is embarrassing. Should have jotted it down.
Taylor Rogers.
Taylor Rogers, obviously a guy who's pitched tremendous since those 3 tough starts at the beginning of the year.
But that's only 4.
Yep, and there's 1 more.
I typed it out last night. It's in the if you're looking at the Monday report, I typed it out yesterday.
Okay, I was actually looking. Let's see. Here we go. This is great. Also, as I'm looking this up, I apologize. Oh, obviously, Reynaldo Rodriguez, who's been all-world for that roster in the middle of that lineup. So, again, the hitters are Reynaldo Rodriguez, Kenneth Vargas, and Tony Thomas. The pitchers being Taylor Rogers and Cole Johnson. All 5 of them very, very deserving of that opportunity to play in that game. The AAA and the AA All-Star games, I believe, are next Wednesday night. After, obviously the All-Star game for the big leagues is on Tuesday. I believe the Wednesday is the AAA and the AA All-Star games.
I could be wrong on this. You can correct me, and maybe you don't have it in front of you, but I think Taylor Rogers leads the organization in innings pitched this year.
I know as of a couple of weeks ago, he was right there. There were several guys that were probably more dependent on who was starting that day. I mean, it was Trevor May, it was Taylor Rogers. There were a couple of other guys that were within, say, 5 innings of each other, which basically means that Of course, if someone else made a start the next day, they would have that lead or take over that lead. But I think the thing about Rogers that's been so impressive for him this year is, again, after those first 3 starts, he's pretty much guaranteed to go at least 6 innings. He's gone 7 several times, and I think he's even got a complete game or 2 in there. And that, to me, is what's important. The thing that impressed me most is I was talking to people a year ago and trying to get information on these guys, where they kept talking about how he would be able to hit 93 and even 94 in the first inning, and he'd still be able to hit that number as the game went on into the 8th inning, in the 9th inning too. So, yeah, right now Taylor Rogers is at 106 innings, Jason Wheeler's at 103.1, and then Sean Gilmartin and Chris Johnson are both at 98.1. Of course, for Johnson, that doesn't include the one start that he had for the Twins. And then J.O. Barrios is right at 96.1. So, there's some guys that are eating some innings this year, which is a good thing.
Now, we can talk about Taylor Rogers a little bit more. The knock on him is basically that he doesn't strike a lot of guys out, right?
It has been, yes.
How is that looking this year?
Well, early in the year, especially even when he was struggling, he was actually getting quite a few strikeouts. But right now in those 106 innings, he's at 82 strikeouts, so he's at 7.0 per 9, which is kind of on that border of, if you were a big leaguer, that's kind of where you want to be, at 7 or more, at least 6.5 or more. Earlier in the year he was getting more strikeouts, but now he's eating more innings. My big thing, is with him is it's not even so much about the numbers. It's having seen him in person and seen that slider, seen that he's got a good fastball and he's got the ability to eat a lot of innings. So I kind of rank him higher than I think a lot of people do. He's giving up some hits. He's not walking many, and he's throwing the ball over the plate. So that tells me a lot.
But he's definitely leapfrogged DJ Baxendale in prospect ratings.
Oh, no question. I think those were 2 guys that, at least for me, and I think you're probably in the same boat, that those were 2 guys that, you could have flip-flopped. I think I had Rogers closer to, say, 19, and Baxendale maybe closer to, mid to upper 20s. And to me, that distance has become further. A lot of that's because Baxendale hasn't pitched much this year. He's been hurt, and he's gone back down. He's kind of a step back from where he was, kind of up and down with Fort Myers right now. So whereas Taylor Rogers has been terrific for, probably 13 of his 17 starts at Double-A. So, he's been able to make that adjustment pretty well.
Double-A is really the place that starts to separate guys too. And as far as we just kind of talked about the guys and how they're ranked with Barrios and Stewart and Meyer, and how Meyer, for me, Meyer's in AAA. He's on the door, knocking at the door, and the other 2 guys are still below AA, and that's why I would rank Meyer higher than the other 2. But now that Barrios is getting an opportunity, if he, regardless of how he did at the beginning of the year, if he were to put up similar numbers to that, if he were to dominate AA, he becomes a top 20 prospect in all of baseball, regardless of whether he's 6 foot or 6'4".
Absolutely.
And, you can dominate single A ball, fine, but if he were to put up just the filthy numbers that he put up in single A at AA, you might see him creep even higher than that. So, that for me separates Rogers and Baxendale. Baxendale struggled with AA, and Rogers has really kind of started to figure it out. So that's a big thing for me. Once you get to AA, it's less about projection and more about production. And to try to balance that, it's difficult. But if you have guys that are producing at AA, then you're a prospect. If you're, Taylor Rogers is in his, is he 23, 24?
Yeah, this is his second full season.
Yeah, he's 23 years old. He's 23 and he's kicking butt at AA. He's a prospect. Regardless of where he was drafted, that's just where it's at. So
I know we're kind of dragging on here, but to me this is interesting. I hope people find it interesting. I personally expect J.O. Barrios to take some lumps in AA. That's a big step, even for the college guys like Taylor Rogers, who are 23, and it's a big step for guys that are 24 and 25 too. and he's going to do it at 20. He's going to basically be the youngest guy in that league or very close to it. So I expect him to take some lumps. One of the things about Rogers that has impressed me the most is that like I said, I expect guys to struggle in their time at Double A when they get that opportunity. But to me, it says a lot when a guy is able to make some adjustments to the league and to the hitters in that league. And then now, like I said, Rogers has sustained that for about 2.5 months. That to me says a lot. When he's at 23 and he's able to sustain that success. In my mind, Berrios could have a 4.5 or 5 ERA in New Britain the rest of this year, and his prospect status in my mind doesn't drop. Period.
Right.
It'd be great to see him go up there and dominate. That'd be pretty exciting. But if he doesn't, or even if he's just league average for the last month and a half or 2 months of the season, I'd be thrilled. The other thing I think it's important for those listening to remember is he's at 96.1 innings right now on this season. Last year, for various reasons, he barely topped 100. I think he was at 101 or something. The Twins are going to be cautious with him in the second half, and I think they should be. At some point, they're going to have him miss a start, and they may even put him on the 7-day disabled list just to be able to activate another player to have a pitcher on the roster. He's going to get some time off, but at the same time, I think they'd like to see if he can get to 140 to 150 innings. So I guess the combination of moving up to Double A, going up against those tougher competitors and tougher hitters, with the fact that he's now getting to innings that he hasn't pitched before, that's some of the reason I expect him to struggle. So again, if he's just league average over the next 2 months, that's a win in my opinion.
Right. He pitched 103.2 last year, but that doesn't include the playoffs, which I know they skipped him towards the end of the year. So he could pitch in the playoffs. So if you're talking, maybe it was 110 innings or so. And that's the other nice thing about Berrios is he has playoff experience in 2012 in the Appy League Championship. He has playoff experience for Cedar Rapids in 2013. So he's granted that's a team thing, but he kind of strikes me as kind of a big game guy. And, he's going to throw in the Futures game on Sunday. So maybe he'll be limited on Wednesday. Maybe he'll only throw 40 pitches or 50 pitches so he can pitch again on Sunday.
Right.
And then he's obviously going to come back and fit in the rotation. At some point, New Britain has basically 6 starters in their rotation, and I would guess that's partially to do with that because, I still consider Vasquez part of their rotation because he just started. But what if he dominates? What if he just continues his tear?
That would be exciting. That would absolutely be exciting. And I'm not convinced, kind of understanding him, seeing how hard he works, hearing people talk about his maturity as much as his stuff, his development of that changeup, with all these things kind of coming together. I would not be surprised if he does go up there and dominate to some degree. Either way, I think he's a guy that's going to be invited to big league spring training next year, and he's on the radar. Not just on the prospect radar, but on the radar for a guy that we need to start thinking about how we're going to plan for him. And I say we,
Right.
meaning, the minor league coordinator, the big league club, the GM, all of that. You got to start thinking about, okay, is he going to be up by midseason next year? That's a real thing at this point.
I know, that's what I'm saying. 7-4. The fireworks and JO next 4th of July.
Very possible. I'm honestly so impressed by this guy that if that happened, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't expect it to happen, but I would not be surprised if it does.
I'm gonna go with fireworks and JO because I went with Futures game in Byron and that didn't work. So I'm gonna switch gears to fireworks and JO. That's my new thing.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm good with that plan.
2015. Okay, moving to Fort Myers here. Big news, obviously. Buxton returned on Sunday, I believe it was. He took 2 at-bats, grounded out to the left side, flew out to the left side, made a spectacular catch in the outfield. They had a scheduled day off yesterday, had a rain out today, so he has not played since then, since going over 2. Aderling Mejia was activated today. Brett Lee was activated. Ethan Mildren joins the rotation from Cedar Rapids, and Todd Van Steensel joins the bullpen in Fort Myers from Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, a lot going on. Obviously, the big news is Buxton being back, and it's important to the organization, more important to him, just to let's get a few games under your belt, feel good about it. Honestly, would it be nice to see him get up to New Britain in 2 weeks? Yeah. If he spends the rest of the year in Fort Myers, is it a lost season? I'm not going to say that. He may be where he was a year before, but his prospect status doesn't falter. Um, at this point, I mean, he's missed enough time now, 3 months basically of game situations, and clearly we saw his defense is probably going to be ahead of his offense. It may take him a couple of weeks to get going with the bat. I mean, I'd like to see him. I think he will get up to New Britain here within, say, 3 weeks or so. But I think again, as we talked about with Sano, the bigger picture is the long term. And if that means he spends the rest of this season just kind of getting everything going again in Fort Myers, and then he goes to the Arizona Fall League again just to get some more at bats, and then have him go to instructional league. I mean, have him do some of these things just to get more at bats, whatever it takes. I mean, he's the future. I mean, he's such an important piece of that if it means being a little bit more conservative, I'm good with that.
Give me your date. I'm going to write it down.
I will actually say August 28th, 2015.
Before you said that, I wrote my date down as July 18th, 2015.
So right after the Futures game again.
Hey, hey, hey.
Oh, man. No, but again, kind of continuing, I don't know if you wanted to add anything more about Buxton or how you feel about his return, but, Mejia had a wrist injury. Brett Lee had the, I think, shoulder issue, but he's made a start now. I think he only went 2 or 3 innings in that start, so they're going to be cautious with him. Ethan Mildren, again, he threw 2 straight 7-inning shutouts or 7 innings of shutout ball at Cedar Rapids, and he really had a feel for 3 pitches, inside the zone, outside corner, inside corner, different speeds on the breaking pitches. He's an advanced pitcher, I think, 11th round pick, I think, a year ago. And Todd Van Steensel, I mean, he's fun to watch out there. He's got some serious idiosyncrasies, as Steve put it. But he is fun to watch, and frankly, he throws pretty good when he gets that high leg kick going with nobody on base. He's pumping 93, 94, and he's getting some movement. He's got a good slider. Obviously coming back, he's a different pitcher than he was 2 or 3 years ago when he was, a starter for Elizabeth, and he's learned some things and he's become a better pitcher. So, I mean, again, very exciting. That's a couple of guys that have earned that promotion.
Yeah, funny thing too about Mildren is when full season rosters were released right before the year, he wasn't on Cedar Rapids roster. He was still in the extended spring, which I think that surprised you. It surprised me. But he's really leapfrogged all of those other guys. Jorge, obviously was sent down. Rosario's hurt. Just some of the other names on that roster, Sleggers, Eads, all those guys. I mean, he passed them all up. So good for him. I mean, that was I think hopefully the hope is that he would eat a bunch of innings, but he's been very effective. So congratulations to those guys that have moved one more step up the ladder. Haven't played in the last couple of days, so there's really not much game we can talk about, but we can move on to Cedar Rapids if you're ready.
Yeah. Actually, Cedar Rapids tonight had a huge game. They busted out for 19 hits and 15 runs, and just some numbers there. All 9 players had at least 1 hit, and 7 of the 9 had 2 hits. The 2 guys that didn't have 2 hits were Jason Kanzler, who was 1 for 3 with 2 walks, and Chad Christensen, who was 1 for 4 with 2 walks. Otherwise, J.D. Williams, 4 for 4 with a double, a home run, and a walk. Ryan Walker, 2 for 3 with a walk, a double, and 4 RBIs. Brian Harr and Mitch Garver each had 2 hits. Tanner Vavra was 3 for 5. Alex Swim was 3 for 5. Pretty big offensive showing in their 15-5 win over Wisconsin. Lewis Thorpe made another start. He wasn't quite as fine as he's been his last couple of starts. He went 4 innings, gave up 3 runs on 2 hits. He walked 3 and struck out 5. Brandon Bixler with an unearned run in 2 innings. He struck out 2. You talked to me just before we went on the show here about Nick Birdie. He made another appearance. He struck out the side. He did give up a 2-out double, you had said, but a 1. He struck out the side on that. Jake Reed, this year's 5th-round pick, with his first appearance with the E-Twins. He was just promoted there in the last couple of days. With all of the other moves, he gave up an unearned run on 1 hit and struck out 1 in his Midwest League debut. And then Hudson Boyd pitched a perfect 9th inning. I guess a couple stories there. Nick Birdie, obviously he's recovered pretty well from his first outing in which he walked all 4 batters he faced. He struck out 2 in his second outing, and he struck out 3 here. So hopefully it was just one little blip on the radar that first outing. What are your thoughts on Birdie? Obviously you had the radar gun reading that you weren't afraid to tell me about before too.
Yeah, apparently he hit 101 on the gun, but it's just interesting because the guy absolutely wet the bed in his first professional appearance, and people were alarmed. Give the guy a chance. Now, obviously, he's moved up to the 7th inning. He's pitched the 7th inning tonight, and Reed pitched the 8th. Not exactly how you would have drawn it up a month ago, but he's a relief guy, and that's what he's going to be. And like I said, a lot of guys were failed relievers. He actually failed in his chance to be a starter in college, and he'll be effective. There's no doubt about it. But let's see what happens. I would like to see Reed get an opportunity to start next year, but I think Birdie's going to be a guy that moves quick. The other moves that we didn't mention were Angel Vilma went to the DL with a J.D. Williams knee to the head induced concussion. Zach Granite went to the DL, and then from E-Town Chiwihu, I don't know if I'm saying that right, was brought up to probably fill a spot in that rotation. Logan Wade, it sounds like he's going to be activated for tomorrow's game.
Yeah, and Logan Wade, I think, is hitting 123 with the GCL in about a week and a half or 2 weeks of GCL at bats in his rehab. But Vielma this is his second stint on the disabled list. Hopefully, it's not more than the 7 days. But boy, he took quite the knee. And if you've seen that picture from, I know Jeff Johnson from the Gazette in Cedar Rapids posted a picture of the play, and you see he gets kneed in the back of the head pretty good. So hopefully he's all right. Hopefully it's not too long. Zach Granite now has a leg injury after returning for about a week and a half due to his shoulder injury. I mean, he's an advanced hitter, a good leadoff type, not a big guy, but a good advanced approach at the plate type of hitter. But he missed almost 2 months, and now he's missing some more time. But Chiwei Hu, he's an interesting guy. I mean, he's a guy from Taiwan who has the delivery kind of like you expect, but he's got some stuff, and he's got the kind of mix that you see with a lot of these guys that have come over from Japan. He's got the split finger. He's got pitches that dance and do some weird stuff, but he's also able to run it up over 90, 92, 93 at times. And then Jake Reed, you talked about Birdie and Reed, pitching the 7th and 8th in a game that was a 10-run rule type of game if they had such a thing. The Twins are traditionally conservative with their relief pitchers, especially these types of guys. They'll pitch 1 every 4 games and 1 inning at a time. It's more important to them to just let these guys after that long college season just kind of get some work in, stay consistent, get into a routine. The fact that Birdie pitched the 7th inning in a blowout doesn't say anything about how they feel about him and his future. Jake Reed, same thing. I mean, he's gonna be a guy that for whatever team he plays with at a given time, he's gonna be an 8th, 9th inning type of guy. But he's just getting some work in these types of situations. It's ideal.
Hey, off topic. Which is the best looking Fox Sports North girl?
Um, I don't know. I'm gonna have to remember what their names are.
Well, there's the blonde one. She's new. It's like Kendall.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think her.
And then Kaylin and Angie are the other two.
All right. So whichever one is on their Twitter page, it's the one on the right. So I think that's Kendall.
Not Kendall's the blonde one. You like the blonde one?
Oh no,
Kaylin?
no, probably.
They're gonna
Yeah,
be at
we'll go
the
with that.
they're gonna be at FanFest on Friday, so I'm gonna get my picture with them for you.
That would be awesome.
It's not true, but we'll see what happens.
You will.
I'm going up there with my two of my sons and one of my son's friends.
Okay, yeah, Kaylin,
I'll put in a good word for you.
for sure. Yeah, do that. Appreciate that.
I'm your wingman.
I mean, again, I definitely appreciate that.
I'm gonna plant the seed for Sunday.
Yeah, hopefully she'll be there.
Okay, we'll put on a good word. Moving on to E-Town. I think the news there is that the top third of their lineup, which is not in their lineup every day, and I haven't even looked at their box score. Seth can fill us in on that today. Tanner English has batting a lot of leadoff. He's been fantastic playing center. Nick Gordon has been phenomenal playing shortstop. And then Max Murphy has been playing, I think, a lot of right field, and he's been sick. So those three guys, and they recently got Matt Batts from the Gulf Coast League. Do you have a
Yeah.
box?
I mean, I can tell you the box score. They won tonight 9-3. A lot of offense again. Jonathan Inojosa 2 for 4 with a walk. Your guy Max Murphy 2 for 3 with a walk. Nick Gordon 2 for 5 with a walk. He's hitting 362, which I don't think any of us would have expected from him to do right away. Tyler Caresa, he was 2 for 4 with a walk. The other day he had 3 hits and all 3 were doubles. So I mean, you mentioned Tanner English hitting 432, Max Murphy hitting 424, Nick Gordon is a 18-year-old hitting 362, Trey Bobber hitting over 300. I mean, they're putting up some really impressive numbers down there, and it's really just those 4. You know, you'll get another guy who will have a big game here and there, but I mean, those 4 right now are kind of leading the way, and especially like you said, English, Murphy, and Gordon. Are you at all surprised with how Gordon's performed to this point?
Yeah, shocked. And I'm not going to look it up, but I tweeted some stats the other day. At this time in Byron Buxton's career, he was in the Gulf Coast League. And he was
Right.
batting like 175.
Yep.
And Nick Gordon is a level ahead, batting 370 something.
Right.
That's phenomenal. Now,
Yep.
at the beginning of their first full professional season, Buxton was in Cedar Rapids. Nick Gordon will be in Cedar Rapids. I think that timeline's not going to change. But it almost makes you think like, I mean, obviously we're not there, but there's people talking and planning out his path, and you almost wonder if they're looking at each other like, did we miss on this guy? Like, did we undervalue, think what he's capable of at this age? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean nobody's thinking that. They believed in this guy all the time, and also you got to remember Joe Mauer at this stage. He hit 400 at Elizabeth, and after he signed too. So I mean it's not unprecedented. But the thing that, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, but with Gordon, the question mark was the bat and the average and things like that. And to this point, and again, it goes back to what I said before. He had the 4-hit night his first game, and then he went on like 1 for 15 slump. But he's come out of that, and now he's hitting 360. He's getting on base at a decent amount. He's striking out every 6 to 7 plate appearances, which is not bad at all. He's showing some pop. He's stealing a couple of bases. He's got 4 errors at shortstop, but that doesn't concern me at all at this point. I mean, you got the fields, you got, the game's a little bit quicker, so I'm sure he's hurrying some things. I don't think 4 errors at this point in 11 I'm sorry, in 16 games, although he's only played short, probably in 12 or 13 of them. I don't see that as an issue at all. In fact, I think that's just fine.
Right, but I mean, you're going to be talking about a kid like Mauer's batting 400, but nobody questioned his bat.
Right, right, and that's the
Nobody got that.
difference.
So I mean, he's going to start the year in Cedar Rapids next year. But are we going to be saying in June, well, he needs to be promoted to Fort Myers?
I mean, we might. I mean, they didn't do that with Plouffe, who was the most recent player who went straight to Elizabethton from high school. They didn't do that with Mauer. Um, Buxton's the one guy that they've done that with. So to me, that's such a rarity that assuming or thinking that that even could happen is way premature. But with what he's done to this point, and again in 70, 75 plate appearances, is certainly encouraging.
Right, and what he's done, I guess, is a large factor. But for me, it's the what he's done plus the who he is. He's a kid that's been around this that was much more mature than anybody realized. That maybe he's just a different breed. I mean, it'll be interesting to see where he ranks, where national pundits put him, because he's a top 100 guy for
Well,
certain.
certainly, certainly.
But
I mean, it's probably not
but
top 50, but if this continues, maybe he is.
right, and that's the thing. It's like I would have put him in the top 75, but someone asked me tonight, and we can talk about it. Um, it was a question I got on Twitter, like where does he fit um, in the Twins rankings? Wyatt Stevens, where would you place Gordon? And I just said I put him in the same group as Rosario, Polanco, Thorpe, and May.
Right.
And I think that's fair. He's in the
Yep.
5 to 10.
Yeah, but
But
I mean, I think prospect-wise, he's ahead of Thorpe and he's ahead of May, and then Rosario and Polanco to me are those are your next three. Those are that 6, 7, and 8, and you can put them in any order. And with the way Gordon's gone, I don't have a problem with him being 6.
right, and Thorpe was a number 101 on BP's top 101.
Right.
I don't know that Rosario made any top 100s. But, I mean, you're talking about a guy. Polanco will probably get a little more love at the end of the year because he was successful in the big leagues as a high A guy. But, I mean, you're putting him in that same group, and that's where we put him. That's where we put him draft night. So it's not
Yep.
like we're really changing our tune, but
No.
at the same time, he's maybe capable of more than capable early of what we expected, and that's a neat thing because we could all use a shortstop, I think.
Right.
I didn't have
By the
any.
way, By the way,
Go ahead.
tonight also Steven Gonsalves did the pitching, and since his first night, he's been pretty good. Tonight he went 5 innings, gave up 2 unearned runs on 5 hits, 3 walks, and struck out 5. And then Sam Clay came in, and the fourth-round pick has really struggled to this point. He gave up an unearned run on 2 hits in 2/3 of an inning, and both of those outs came on strikeouts. Keaton Steele came on. He gave up just 1 hit over 2 1/3 innings. He struck out 3, and then Josue Montanez went an inning and struck out 1. But Sam Clay, and again, I know a lot of people are like, man, I didn't like that pick when it happened, and now I really don't like it. He's a left-handed pitcher out of Georgia Tech. I mean, right now in 6 games, he's thrown 7 innings. He's given up 8 hits, 9 runs, 7 of them earned, so he's got a 9.0 ERA. He's walked 8 and struck out 9, so his whip is like 2.29. Not worth worrying about at this point, but certainly not the kind of start that you'd like him to get off to. And again, it goes back to the Gordon conversation in that Gordon's 18 and hasn't played a day in college ball. And you've got guys, and even Michael Cederath had a rough start his most recent outing, that have had 3 or 4 years of college experience that are struggling with that adjustment to pro ball. So, I mean, it kind of ties together there a little bit.
For sure. I don't have anything with the GCL affiliate. Is there anything that you would like to?
Well, the only other thing I'd like to mention, and it goes back to Elizabethton. First of all, Felix Jorge, who dominated the Elizabethton or the Appalachian League last year, he's thrown 15 innings and has yet to give up an earned run. In fact, he hasn't given up an unearned run yet. So he's 2-0. With the only issue there is he's walked 7, but he struck out 12. The other name that I think was kind of missing previously is Sam Gibbons. And he's Australian. He's thrown 17 innings over 3 starts, 1-1 with a 2.12 ERA. His whip is 0.88. He's got 3 walks to 21 strikeouts in those 17 innings. And in his most recent start, it was probably the best start of his career. It was actually his most recent start. He went 6 innings, gave up 2. The start before that, he went 7 innings and gave up just 1 hit. But his most recent start, in those 6 innings that he gave up 2 runs, he walked 1 and struck out 11. So he spent 2 years in the GCL, and that's why, you really, with these guys from foreign countries, you got to kind of give them a little bit more patience because of that. So just a couple of key notes, I think, for Elizabethton, and I know I'm dragging this on a little bit, and I appreciate anyone who's still listening, and hopefully you're providing us feedback. But anyway, I think we had to talk about both of those.
So do you have any GCL stuff? I know they played 2 games today. Split. I think they won 1 game 2-1 and lost the other one 1-0.
Yeah, not a lot to talk about there. I mean, Amoris Minier in the second game was 2 for 3 with his 4th double. He's hitting 356, but he's been really inconsistent. In the first game, he was 0 for 3 with 3 strikeouts. So when he puts the bat on the ball, he just hits the ball really well, but he doesn't always do that. And then again, as you mentioned, the pitching was key. Onesimo Hernandez, he gave up 1 run on 6 hits in 5 innings. He walked none and struck out 8, so that's encouraging, obviously. And in the second game, they had Josh Geyer, Alexis Tapia, and Eduardo Del Rosario each pitch in that game, and the group combined to give up only an unearned run. So I mean, there's some good pitching there. From game to game, you don't know what you're going to get in the GCL, and right now, other than Minier and Nelson Molina, who of course struggled last year, he's hitting 324. Jack Berry's hitting 316. He's only 17 years old, but you take away his 4 for 4 game, and he's 2 for 15. So, we're talking about pretty small sample sizes here, so it's hard to get too excited positively or negatively about any of this. But it is kind of just nice seeing them get some early playing time and that kind of thing. Matt Batts definitely earned that promotion. I mean, he's a 4-year college guy. In 10 innings in the GCL, he gave up just 4 hits and 1 walk and struck out 9. So, I mean, that's a guy that as soon as there was an opening, they were ready to get him up. But, I mean, actually the bigger concern is guys like Trevor Hildenberg and Mike Theophanopoulos, who are both kind of struggling, but they're college guys who, probably, again, have been pitching since January. So not that you're making excuses for them, but, I mean, that is a long season, and their arms are probably shot. So I'll be quiet. That's really what I have from that group.
Okay, well, and I don't have anything to add to that. Let's move on here. Last week marked the beginning of the international free agency period, and last Tuesday I was on here and said that I didn't think the Twins were going to make any big splashes on the first day, which was Wednesday morning. The period opened at 8 a.m., and at 8:02, Jesse Sanchez of MLB.com tweeted that the Twins had a deal with Huskar Anoa of the Dominican Republic for $800,000. He's a right-handed pitcher, and he's the little brother of Michael, who signed for like a record of $4.25 million. Some inconsistencies. Really, it's hard to get a scouting report on a guy when you see him one time and he's fantastic, and you see him a couple of times and he's brutal. It's really hard to put any sort of ceiling or floor on a guy. Obviously, the floor is, he's never going to make it out of the Dominican League. But he turned 16 the end of May, so he's just recently 16. He will begin his professional career next year in the Dominican Summer League, probably as a 17-year-old. So it'll be interesting to see how his career progresses. Later that day, in agreement with Jean Carlos Arias, turned 16 in January, signed for $450,000. He's an outfielder. And then catcher by the name of Dalin Cuesto signed for $250,000, and he actually turned 16 in October. So far there's those three, and then Baseball America on their transaction page listed that the Twins signed an outfielder from South Africa, excuse me, by the name of Rowan Eberso, and he was a guy that had pitched a little bit. I think he's a little bit older. I think he's like 18, um, but another guy. Now, the Twins don't typically announce all these names. They'll go through and they'll get physicals. I think Doogie Wolfson tweeted that they had deals with like 10 guys done. Um, but didn't release any names. So that's just how they work. Now, the big news of the international signing period has been the Yankees, and they've essentially what they've done is they've said, MLB, you've given us our spending cap. We're going to spend whatever we want, and that prompted me to do some research. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but what I did is I went through like Baseball America's top 100. I went through a top whatever list, and a majority of the guys that are top prospects around baseball, the Oscar Tavareses, the Gregory Polanco's, the players like that, almost all of them were really, really low money guys, like 15,000 or 40,000. While you had a big time guy like Miguel Sano who signed for 3.15 million, that was the most. I think there was like 3 or 4 guys over $1 million. The rest were all under $1 million. So it just made me think, like, what are the Yankees doing? They're going to spend 15 million. They're going to pay taxes. They're essentially going to spend $30 million for a bunch of 16-year-olds. That it's a giant crapshoot. So I started looking at just the draft. Okay, let's say the Yankees decide we're gonna just ignore the bonus pools and we're gonna draft the best guys. Well, they could have taken some high school guys that weren't gonna sign and offered them $5 million. They could have taken Mac Marshall, who was a top 100 prospect that fell to like the 14th round. You could have taken him in the 11th round or the 8th round and given him $2.5 million. There was a number, Jaron Kendall, a kid from not far from here in Wisconsin. He's not going to sign, but they certainly could have given him a couple $1 million. What do they end up giving up? They end up giving up their first round draft pick for 2 years. Wouldn't you rather have high school guys that are 18 than guys that you've seen a couple of times that are 16? I mean, what's going to replenish your farm system quicker?
I think there's much more. Those 2 years are big. So to me, grabbing a 18-year-old who's a first rounder, obviously there's some talent there in the first few rounds. To me, there's much less risk. I don't get it. I don't get what they're doing.
Right, and people are mad. I mean, people are mad. Like, they're breaking the rules. They're not breaking the rules, but it's not like they just took 10 first-round picks. That's not what happened. And the metaphor, the way that I tried to make sense of this is, if LSU, a college football powerhouse, turned around and signed the best 10 high school freshmen in the nation, is that good, bad, or indifferent to their program?
It's obviously good.
Okay. And then I started thinking, but this isn't the case. This is 16-year-olds, and this isn't how they're going to be when they're 19. And I wouldn't even know that that's good. You look at the top high school football players. Things, yeah, you're going to get your studs, but a lot of things change. Here's the deal. What if the Vikings could sign the best high school sophomores in the nation right now? The 10 of their choice. Is that going to be good for them in 8 years?
Not likely.
No, and that's what the Yankees did. What are they going to do with these guys? Well, probably what they're going to do is they're just going to flip them because they don't develop their own prospects anyway. But the whole way that this worked out, I think people are just grossly overreacting to what the Yankees did. And I think the Yankees at the end of the day are going to look really, really stupid because the majority of your best players don't come from the top 30. I mean, you're gonna get some of them, yeah, but if they sign 10 guys for a ton of money, they might hit on like four of them.
if that.
Right. I mean, if they're good, they're hitting on four of them. Is that going to change their prospect thing? These guys aren't even going to be in Double A for 5 or 6 years. And the other thing that it does is when you do well in the international market, you have to add these guys to the 40-man roster essentially a year earlier. The Keplers, the Polancos, those types of guys, you're adding them when they're in high A. If the Yankees hit on 4 or 5 of these guys, they're going to have 5 spots of they're going to have 12% of their 40-man just be taken by guys that can't play in the major leagues. That's not going to happen. They're going to have to move. They're going to have to move some people. So I think their whole strategy was flawed. I think the rules of Major League Baseball are flawed. But if you're going to blow something out of the water, blow the draft bonus out. Just blow it out of the water. You're going to get your draft picks back when your free agent signs somewhere else.
Right.
And the Yankees are, if they're good, they're drafting late anyway. I mean, if you're not a good team, you don't want to risk that. But if the Yankees think they're going to be good and they're drafting in the 20s, just give that pick up. Take the comp pick back and just draft as you want. And I think you would notice, or you would see that the teams that have saved money, like the Astros, and have made that, we're going to try to save money here to spend it later. If you just spend it later, you're going to get the guys. I mean, the guys are limited. Teams are limited by how much money they can spend. So spend it all. If you don't care, just spend it all and see what happens.
Listen, my opinion on this is the same as it is with them signing crazy contracts to free agents. I mean, most of them aren't going to turn out. And if they do, it'll be for a smaller window, and then they'll have a bunch of bad contracts and be in a situation like they are again now. I don't get this. We've talked a lot over the last couple of weeks about this, and that you and I or our opinion, I think, is even rather than signing the big dollar ones, I mean, instead of spending a guy at 3.3, spend $500,000 on 6 guys, and your chances of one of them making it big is about the same. In fact, it's much better. So I'm good with the way the Twins went about it. They got a guy with a big upside that I think a lot of people thought was going to get more in Inoa, and got him for $800,000. Then they've signed a few guys for $250,000, things like that, and they've still got time. So, I don't really have a concern about what the Yankees did, and I don't get it, and I just frankly don't care because I think it's just hurting them at the end of the day, which is always enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is with can't miss guys. And you look at the MLB draft, and I would say Rodon is as close to can't miss as you can get. Brady Aiken, I don't know. He's got some elbow thing going on right now. But really one can't miss guy. And even some people say, well, he might be a miss. There's not any can't miss guy. And apparently the Rays just signed a really, really good one. And maybe he's as close to can't miss as an international guy as you can get. But those don't come around very often, and the Yankees certainly didn't sign a handful of can't miss guys. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously, looking back at the 7 years from now, we won't remember this conversation, but I don't see this working out promising for the Yankees. And like you said, that's fun. Anything else we want to talk about before we jump into some of the questions we got from viewers?
No, I think we've exhausted all of the teams, unless you want to get into the DSL, which I really don't. So let's maybe just do some quick hitters with our questions at the end of the show and call it a show because we're already at 128 minutes. So
yeah, we've been going a little bit longer than I anticipated, but that's okay.
That's all right.
Question number 1. This comes from All Day with 2K. What happened to Zach Jones, a dominant flamethrowing closer from Cedar Rapids last year? Seth, you are all over that one.
Yeah, he was actually with Fort Myers last year. He was their closer along with Corey Williams. Corey Williams did have his Tommy John surgery this spring. Zach Jones had, and it kind of started last year in the Arizona Fall League when he had some lost feeling in his fingers. They found an aneurysm in his shoulder. He had to have surgery on that aneurysm. Um, and as that was starting to recover, and they knew that would take a month or two before he would even be able to come to Fort Myers, and then at that point, they found a blood clot in his leg, and were able to kind of take care of that with some blood thinners and such. And in doing so, he returned to Fort Myers maybe a month or 5 weeks ago. And the most recent conversation and conversation I heard from him was, and he's hoping to get into some games here over the next couple of weeks, maybe. And I'm guessing they'd throw him in the GCL for a couple of games, and maybe even get back with Fort Myers by the end of the year. These are obviously two very serious things that aren't baseball injuries. They're an aneurysm and a blood clot. These aren't things you mess around with. So, missing the time because of that is obviously what had to happen.
Second question, also from All Day with 2K. Could Byron Buxton end up in New Britain at any point this season, or will he be limited to Fort Myers?
No, we talked about that a little earlier. I guess my opinion is if he is limited just to Fort Myers because the bat isn't catching up, I don't think that hurts anything. But I do expect once he kind of gets it going, gets maybe 40 at bats or something under his belt, I would expect he'll get up to New Britain.
See, I'm going to go on the other side of that coin and say, at this point, I think the Twins would like to just have him see as much time as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Fort Myers is going to the playoffs.
Right.
That's an extra week, or more. And then send him to the Arizona Fall League. And then start him next year in New Britain, day one. And really, yeah, I mean, his timeline probably slowed down, but he'll be all right.
Right.
Either way, I'm not going to, if he ends the year in Fort Myers, whatever, if he ends the year in New Britain, it's not going to change my opinion on him at all. Question from Troy Patrick that's beyond clarity. If Meyer isn't added to 40-man until after the season, Twins would essentially have gained a whole year service time, ? I'll take that one.
Go ahead.
No, that's not essentially what happens. Before guys are on the 40-man, there's really two clocks that count against them, and that's their minor league service clock, which starts with their first full season. And you put six full seasons in and you become a free agent, a minor league free agent. Or depending on your where you came from, you put 4 or 5 years in before you're exposed to the Rule 5 draft. Once you are added to the 40-man roster, whether that's the day you're drafted or whenever, a new clock start. And obviously the one clock that you're always dealing with is your service time, and that would be only when you're on the 25-man roster. Every day you're up, that's a day. 172 of those days makes a year. 6 of those years make 6 years, and then you become a free agent. That's your one clock. Your second clock is when you're on the 40-man and you're not on the 25-man roster, and then you get 3 years where you can be shuttled back and forth, and those are your optional years. So if Alex Meyer were to be added to the 40-man right now and not brought up, he would be using an option year, but nothing to do with service time. If Meyer were to be brought up now and put on the 25-man roster, you're talking about less than 100 days, so it's not going to change his service clock at all. He's not going to put in a full year this year, so it's going to take him this year and 6 more years to get up to those 6 years. It's a complicated thing, but if you are really, really curious and don't understand it, send me an email, jeremynagard1@gmail.com. That's how I got into this stuff. There was, I can't even think, Josh Taylor? Is that a name?
Yep.
I used to email him.
Long ago.
Yeah, I used to email him with all sorts of questions because I was just trying to understand it. So I will pay that forward. If you have questions, certainly email me and I can try to talk you through it. Otherwise, you can give me a call and we'll talk, because I like talking about that stuff, as you may or may not have noticed. Next question from MN Sports.
Can I just add one bit to that,
Yeah.
Jeremy? You
Yes.
talk about it being interesting for us, but it also, in my mind, it makes these discussions clearer in your mind, and you can see why it's important that Doug Bernier, for instance, isn't added on the 40-man roster, and why it's easier once he's on to call him up, and you don't have to lose somebody, or you understand why a guy might not get called up for the first month of a season, so that you can gain that one additional year of service time, or why a guy might, or the team might wait until mid-June to call a guy up. Or, I mean, there's just so many intricacies of this that are really interesting when you put them all together, and when you understand those, it kind of gives you a different perspective on why certain decisions are made by the front office.
Right, and it also makes some of these decisions that front offices make very, very clear what their intentions were. Like when you add a
Right.
guy to the 40-man roster without adding him to the 25-man roster. You're doing it to not subject him to the recreational drug policy.
Right.
So there's so many stupid little details that I don't know. It's one of those things. Let's just move on.
Yep.
Do Twins fans, MN Sports 255 says, do Twins fans have reason to doubt Rick Anderson's credibility amid Vance Worley's recent comments? Do you guys think he is safe as a pitching coach beyond the season? We kind of touched on that one too, but I'll let you conclude on that.
Yeah, regarding the first question, do the Twins fans have reason to doubt Rick Anderson's credibility because of those comments? One, I think a lot of us and a lot of fans question his credibility anyway. But on that situation, I mean, if it's such a small technical thing, I mean, obviously Rick Anderson's not the only one that missed it. A lot of teams watched him this spring and could have traded for him for nothing. When you're talking individual case by case by case, I think it's silly to worry about someone's credibility based on one person's comments. With Anderson, and again, this isn't very much like me because I'm the optimistic, don't fire people guy. I think there's enough of those individual situations that I think that it's safe to answer your second question by saying I don't think he's safe beyond this year. As we talked about earlier, I don't think he's safe at all.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's really safe if they hit the 90 loss threshold again.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other point. I mean, that's the bigger reason why none of them are safe. But again, this is one instance, and let's see how Worley does over the course of the rest of the season, not just 4 starts, and go from there. But again, that was one instance. Every pitching coach is going to have their successes and their perceived failures. So, is the reason to doubt his credibility because of this one instance? No. But, again, there's enough instances that would make people wonder.
From Tom Gorgon, chances Twins are sellers. Plenty of guys could be moved.
Yeah, I think we spent a lot of time on that. Chances the Twins are sellers, I mean, I think it's 100%. You may disagree. Maybe you'll say less. I mean, how much they are actually able to sell and be willing to get or get back. I mean, that's one question. I definitely think they're going to try to sell and get as much as what they can. There's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of guys to move, Tom. So, how many of them will they move? I think they should be active. There's a lot of guys that could get them something.
Did they trade anybody in July last year, or did they wait to trade Morneau until August?
Morneau was August.
That was it.
Was that the only deal?
Yep.
Okay. Well,
Willing-
Butera was July 31st, but
and Willingham was claimed but not traded.
right.
See, that's the thing. It's like the July deal, the July deadline becomes pretty anticlimactic because the guys with value, the pitchers, have more value if you move them earlier because you're getting 4 extra starts or 5 extra starts. Once you get to the end of July and you kind of know who's available and what's available, then it gets into August, you start throwing guys on the waiver wire to see, who else is there. So I'm hoping that the Twins starting next week, start exploring some of these deals because I think they'll have more of a chance to move guys. Um, Also from Tom, can you guys talk about the previous international signing periods? He mentioned 2009 to 2013. What I did is I just went through the rosters of Rochester through Elizabethton, and um, 2009 was the year that they signed Sano, Polanco, and Kepler, which it's a fantastic year. You got two of those guys in the 40 man. The third one signed after the conclusion of the minor league season, so he won't have to be added until the end of this year. But you're getting three guys on the 40 man roster from the same class. Um, that's pretty impressive. 2010, the guys that are playing between the Appy League and up are Adderling Mejia, Randy Rosario, Yorman Londa. Mejia's basically exceeded the expectations. None of those guys, as far as I know, were real big signings. 2011, you have Vielma, Romero, Gibbons, Jorge, and Lowe. A group with potential, but
A lot of guys in that 200 to say 400,000 range. I think Londa was in there as well.
in 2010, yeah. And then 2012, you have Thorpe, who got a decent deal, Logan Wade, who's really struggling, and who
Chiwehu.
I can't think of what his first name is. But the hard thing is you don't really get a good. Sano, Polanco, and Kepler signed in 2009. It's 2014. It's 5 years later. We have a pretty good idea what Sano's about. Polanco was a mystery up until about a week and a half ago, and Kepler's still a mystery. So you're not really.
Yeah, but they're highly touted enough, as you said earlier, to get on the 40-man roster, which tells you everything you need to know about how they feel about them and how other organizations feel about them.
Right. Here's also what you need to know. The Twins have two guys on their 25-man roster and disabled list that were signed as international free agents. Oswaldo Arcia and Danny Santana. They were both signed in 2007. So we're talking 7 years. And neither of those are established players. 8 years. We're talking 8 years, essentially, from when they signed to when you're established Major League ball players. And out of that whole group, there's two guys. So, and I don't think there's anybody, I could be wrong. There's not many of them that signed in 2008. Pinto signed in 2006. Debinson Romero signed in 2004.
Johan Pino in 2004.
Yeah, I don't have him listed because he left and came back. I mean, that's your group. Adrian Salcedo in 2007. And these guys are levels away. So you're gonna find some very great players to come there because obviously the guys from the Dominican, the guys from Venezuela, there's great ball players there, but it's hard to find those guys. So like we talked about with the Yankees, there's a chance, but there's also a great chance that you miss. There are some questions on Twins Daily from Lightfoot789. We talked about the moves of Malatakis and Rodriguez. He wants to know talk about the non-moves. And he lists 5 names. J.D. Williams, who's still in Cedar Rapids. Jorge Polanco, who's still in Fort Myers. Tyler Jones, who's closing currently in New Britain. Right?
Yep. Oh, no, he's in Fort Myers.
Fort Myers still. Matt Tomshaw, who's still in Fort Myers. And Ronaldo Rodriguez, who's in New Britain.
Yeah, I mean, Polanco could probably play at Double-A, and that could happen at some point here. I mean, all of those 5 that you mentioned can or maybe should come up. I mean, move up a level. Rodriguez is kind of a minor league veteran. He's what they call organizational depth, fair or not, and I'm one who'd like to see him get an opportunity to move up. Tom Shaw may be viewed that way. He's 25, but he's been the rock in that rotation and in that pitching staff the whole time. But yeah, I think he's earned a promotion as well. There's other guys too. I mean, Tyler Jones, I'm kind of 50-50 on. I'd like to see him move up, but he hasn't been tremendous to this point. And he did miss some time again with injury earlier in the year. I'm missing probably a couple of the earlier names. Polanco, as we said, could probably move up at any time too. I'm almost surprised he didn't with this string here with Barrios and Melitakis moving up. So, I mean, those are guys that could move up. There's always guys that could move up, and that's not a bad thing for those teams that they're playing on too. So, I mean, there has to be a fit. It can't just be about moving guys up. It's about what's best for the team, what's best for the player, and where there's openings.
Right. He also asked what happens as guys are coming off the DL long term in this year. Panea was sent to E-Town. I mean, I think the writing's on the wall there. Levi Michael, though, that's a little more interesting because he had been having a really, really good year before he fouled the ball off his foot. That's probably almost 2 months ago. Hasn't played since then.
Yeah, and maybe that's the timing. Maybe when Michael comes back to Fort Myers, gets a couple games under his belt, that's when Polanco gets that opportunity. I mean, yes, the Miracle are in the playoffs, and that's great. But now that the Rockcats are at 500, there's no reason for them not to say, hey, let's go for a playoff spot either. I know that winning has very little to do with player development, but I also believe that learning how to and being part of winning teams is a positive thing for any player. So if guys like Polanco and Barrios and Melitakis can move up to New Britain and help them be part of the winner and be part of the answer for them getting to a playoff spot and a run in the late part of the season, I mean, that's only going to benefit them over time.
He also asked if Tony Thomas is blocking Polanco since he recently made the AA All-Star game.
Maybe, but guys like Barrios and Polanco aren't going to get blocked. Sano's not going to not move up. If he was healthy this year, DeBenson Romero would not be blocking him. They'd move him up. Buxton, when he's ready to move up, whoever's playing center field in New Britain, whether it's Hicks moves to right or Rosario moves to left or whatever, Buxton's going to play center field in New Britain. Barrios wasn't going to be held back when he was ready and deemed ready. They moved him up, and Polanco was in that same category. Tony Thomas is 28, 29. He can play 3 infield positions. He can DH. He can do a lot of things. They'll keep him on the roster. They'll drop somebody else or move somebody else up, but those guys aren't going to block a guy like Polanco.
Right, and then the last question, I think we hit on this one. What is the difference in pitching from the Florida State League to the Eastern League? I thought the Florida State League was a pitching league and the Eastern League was a hitting league. What will a prospect learn at A+ that he couldn't endure at AA as a hitter?
As a hitter, I mean, you're going to get guys with just sharper stuff. I mean, you're going to get guys who, guys like J.O. Barrios pitch in New Britain. I mean, they don't stay in Fort Myers. They move up, and you're just going to get better pitchers. You're going to get older pitchers who have now been through 2 or 3 years of minor league time and know how to get hitters out. So, I mean, there's a lot to the experience factor when you get to that point. But again, that's where the younger they are, the more the prospects they are if they're hanging in there.
Right, and I think that's the key is the pitchers are that much better, even though the conditions are maybe better for the hitters. When the guy on the mound's better, the conditions aren't any better.
Yeah, I mean, the pitchers are better, the hitters are better, everyone's better, so the game's a little faster, and I mean, it's just that progression. I mean, it's just better players, better competition. You got to be better.
Do you have any parting words before we sign off for 8 days?
I'm tired, but I think we've got a busy week ahead of us. You and I will be together at the Futures game. So again, if anyone's going to be there and you listen to this and you want to say hi, tweet us or something at Seth Tweets or at Jeremy Nygaard or at Twins Hangouts, and it'd be kind of cool to meet a few people if anyone's interested to just say hi. We can do that. We'll be back next Wednesday night, and obviously, as I mentioned every week, any feedback would be great. If you made it through all 2.5 hours here, let us know. Put it on Twins Daily or tweet us or something like that. I'm sure there will be 2 or 3 of you that make it through the whole thing, and we do appreciate that. So, and always, any thoughts you have, let us know.
We did have one last question. I didn't refresh my computer, but it shows up on my phone. From Kurt, 1965. He wonders if there's any news on Santana's rehab from his mysterious injury.
Danny Santana?
Yes.
I don't think we've heard anything for a while. He can't come off the disabled list for 15 days. So, I mean, I think that's right after the All-Star break. I guess in my mind, no news is good news. Tells me everything's going fine. But I mean, I think he's with the team and he's traveling with the team. I've heard that they want to get him to do some rehab, but he hasn't to this point. I don't think.
Right, and I think with a bone bruise, we had a kid in football get a bone bruise in his leg. He'd try to come back, and it just couldn't come back. And obviously, professionals and trainers and all that good stuff will hopefully have a little more under wraps. But it was just one of those nuisance injuries that it was really hard to return from.
Right.
That's the last question we're going to have. If you didn't make it this far, Seth is almost as tired as the time he joined us from Fort Myers.
Just about. I'm getting there.
That's
Unfortunately, we've got a Twins game to watch this whole time. It's in the ninth inning right now, and so those of you can listen to this as you're reading about this in tomorrow's newspapers.
That's right. Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. Thanks for joining us. However you got here. If you left questions, thanks for participating. We'll be back next Wednesday night, same time, 9 o'clock. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you next Wednesday.